Welcome everyone to the Godzilla Masterclass. We're going to go through the complete filmmaking workflow in Unreal, take you from a beginner to knowing all the steps and give you that complete roadmap to making your own films and go from idea to final film entirely in Unreal. And we're going to do it through a really fun project of me going ahead and trying to make my own Godzilla visual effects film from scratch, starting from a completely blank scene, using assets along the way. I'll show you where I found the best assets and where you can find those too. But yeah, we'll break down the whole process and jump right into it. I'm super excited. And the big takeaway here is I want everyone to come out of this knowing how to make your own films without these insane Hollywood budgets. I got some stories I'll share later on, but to me, it's really about how can you make films on your own or with a small team, not with 300 people, but with 5 or 10 really awesome people and you bringing your own vision to life. I think that's what is so powerful in Unreal and something that was really hard to do before. I just wanted to shout out some really cool student work from our last masterclass. Like this is the coolest part to me, but you know, people, those of you out here who want to take this seriously, who are here to take notes and actually apply these lessons, I think it's very easy to watch a bunch of tutorials out there on the internet, but it is hard to actually go out there and apply them, change your behavior, change how you approach other projects. And I want to give you the best skills and tips I have, transfer as much as I can. And yeah, just to replay this, we had some really cool student work from some folks who took the Dune Masterclass last month, who were able to create crazy, awesome, huge, high-budget sci-fi level shots and visual effects by following along with what I'm teaching here. So anyone out here can do it. Shout out to Gal Ravital. This was really, really cool and shows that, yeah, I'm trying to give away the best stuff I have here, literally holding nothing back and all of the best secrets I have. So I love starting out each one of these. Let me know in the chat right now, what is your favorite movie? And even more than that, I want to find out what is that movie that made you want to make movies. The first one I always go back to is the pod racing scene from Star Wars, but I'll tell the story here too. Like Godzilla was instrumental in me taking that step to approach visual effects as a career path and going further. But just, I asked this at the start of every single live stream because I think it's important to go back to what are those movies that make you passionate? It could be Lord of the Rings. I've rewatched those behind the scenes so many times, and that's right up there with some of those movies that made me want to make movies, but also Star Wars, Star Wars A New Hope, Ready Player One, Pirates of the Caribbean. There's so many out there. I'm seeing the Marvel movies, The Matrix. I can't even believe I forgot The Matrix. I didn't even see that until like 3 or 4 years ago. I saw it super, super late for some reason, and oh my God, it made me fall in love with movies all over again. 2001: A Space Odyssey, that's super cool. And I'm seeing Blaine, you worked on Godzilla 2014 as an animator. Dude, that is so cool. Like literally, I will get to it in just a second, but Godzilla 2014 was, I saw that movie in theaters and it literally made me right then and there say, visual effects is what I need to do. I need to go all in on this career path. And dude, the work is absolutely incredible in that film, and it made me want to work at MPC. And yeah, we'll get to all that, but it's really cool. Interstellar, that's awesome. Dune Part 2, yeah, even Dune Part 2 is another one of those movies that just, wow. It reminds you how special cinema can really be. But yeah, I love starting out with this question because I love to turn it back on myself. I think about this all the time, is how many movies have you made in your life? Because I know when I first started out, I had all these big ideas, and I can just think of the graveyard of all these ideas that I started and never finished. So be honest, if you have the heart and you're strong enough to put it in the chat, how many movies have you made in your life? I think my total number of things that I could present, and there's a story and everything, I made lots of YouTube videos in my life, but actual films is probably somewhere in the 7 or 8 range, which is still not that many. And why I want to ask this is because I think all of us are filmmakers at heart, but maybe you haven't actually gone ahead and taken that next step to complete that first film, or at least get to that level where you're super proud of it. And I think that's like, I like looking at the harsh reality of that because it makes me rethink my approach and think, what have I been doing wrong this whole time, and how can I fix that going forward? Because ultimately, like, is it more or less than you imagined? I would think for most of you that it's less. So we're seeing 2 or 3 or 5. That's cool. Henry Q3. And that's the thing is, and I've definitely contributed to a lot more, but ones that you have actually taken from start to finish. That is the hard part here. And that's what we're going to try to fix today, is think of how can we make it super simple, super easy, because that's what we're trying to do. And the reality is why so many of us were super passionate about it, but we haven't necessarily finished as many as we would have hoped for, is because filmmaking is genuinely one of the hardest art forms out there, because filmmaking is every single artistic discipline all at once, all at the same time. It's acting, it's lighting, it's composition, and that creative eye that touches in with painting and illustration. It can be dance, it can be literally every single art form, music, audio, everything, all at once. So that is why it's so difficult. So what I want to try to provide for all of you is a little bit more clarity, so you can actually take those ideas in your head and turn them into final films in just a couple weeks here, because ultimately that's what we're all looking for. Is, for me, I want to look back. I always try to think, like, what am I going to think when I'm 80? And I want to look back and say, I gave it my all. I left every idea I had out there on the field, and I did my best, and at least tried to make a perfect movie. That's always what I personally go back to. But this is why being self-taught is super difficult, is because when you are self-taught, and I've been a self-taught visual effects artist and filmmaker and pretty much everything, I kind of start on YouTube and keep pulling on the thread and go down the rabbit hole, is you have to go through this maze by yourself, versus when you actually have a roadmap and you know what other people have done before, it becomes incredibly easy. So that's what we're trying to do today, is give you a roadmap for each skill in the filmmaking process. And one thing to touch on here is I think there's two things to learn, and you need both. One is strategies, that's the roadmap, that's how we get from A to B, and the other is tactics. It's how do you actually, what buttons do you press, what are the software specific skills that you need, and I want to try to give you both today. So we need the why and the how. Both are equally important because you need both. If you just learn tactics, if you just go and only watch Unreal tutorials and don't make your own projects, you're not actually going to finish a single film. And I think that's lots of people in the YouTube space and users, and that was myself for a long time. So again, I just want to try to get us all past that point and start being creative with Unreal. So if you're new to Unreal, you're going to learn the strategies. And if you are advanced, for those of you out there, we're going to teach you some of those tactics. So that's why I want you to take notes. I'm going to go fast once we get into the content section here, when we're going into the lessons with the Godzilla scene, because I'm gonna go pretty fast just so I can get through everything. But before that, just to start us off, how do you actually get good at filmmaking? I think this is a critical question, because again, a lot of us know we want to be filmmakers, but we haven't made that many films. So what's in our way? Like, what is the thing that's preventing us from getting good at filmmaking? And the thing is, I think a lot of people think they get better by watching films, but just focus on the word. To be good at filmmaking, you have to make your own films. You actually have to produce your ideas from scratch, and that's why it's so hard. So we need a way to learn filmmaking to make it easier and faster. And the two problems that I faced, and I think everyone faces as they're trying to become a better filmmaker, is that filmmaking can be incredibly expensive, especially when you're starting out. So I had the chance to work on set on Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that was my first like major production where I was able to be there on set and see the hundreds of extras and all these, like the flocks of people and art department and set builders and locations and everything. And it was very cool to see the entire process up close, but it also made me realize I would need tens of millions of dollars to make a film like this. But I want to make films that are kind of in that same Avatar: The Last Airbender world, where we're in these fantasy worlds, maybe they're in sci-fi worlds. It's just things that you wouldn't just see down the street, but you know, these stories that are bigger than life. So it's incredibly expensive. The film gear, the lights, the crew, lunches, hotels for everyone. So actually trying to do this on your own, it's definitely very tricky at the beginning. And the other thing is that because it's so expensive, it makes it very hard to practice. So looking back at 2020, I actually just finished up on Godzilla vs. Kong, and I got laid off after that. That was kind of the last project before everyone wrapped up for COVID, which was a crazy time. But I knew when I got back home in Wisconsin that I had to start making my own film. I've been thinking about it for so long, but something was standing in my way every time. And I spent so many years making other people's visions instead of my own. And then when I finally got together, we crewed up, we got 40 people, we got locations and extras, and we made all the costumes ourselves, and we've really figured it all out and just went for it from start to finish. But it was a really challenging time because I hadn't made a film before. So it was so stressful, and I was laying the track in front of the train the entire time. There was no room for error, and then I spent an incredibly long time in post to make that work because I was kind of making up for the mistakes I made on set. And if I had gotten more practice before I had started, even small short films, it would have made the process so much easier. And I think that is where that's where I was like, how can I get better at filmmaking without paying for a crew every time, without paying for 10 different people to show up? And even if you're asking friends, it's like, you know, they're still spending their whole day with you. It's 12-hour days, you're going crazy. Or, I mean, lots of you are busy, you have work, you have a family, things get in the way. So we need to find those pockets of times where we can become better filmmakers without so much time. You're always going to spend time, but hopefully without spending as much money. So that's where I personally turned over to visual effects and CGI to say, okay, maybe I could make animated films, so at least I could practice these ideas instead of just going for gold and spending a bunch of money all at once and just hoping it works out. Is there a way that we could practice filmmaking using visual effects and CGI? And that's probably why a lot of you are here, is because I think there's so much promise, and you've probably seen the marketing material about Unreal and all these other softwares, but oftentimes it can feel like we're being pulled in all these directions. Like, you see, we should learn Blender or Houdini, or, you know, Maya is the industry standard, so you should learn Maya, or maybe you should learn After Effects. And then you end up not actually picking the one software that you need to learn to actually get closer to finishing a film. If that's your goal, or it's just to work at a visual effects studio, learning 5 different softwares at one time is gonna take you 5 times longer than just learning one. So that's why, at least in this beginning section, I want to focus in on why we're choosing Unreal, and then we're going to get into the Godzilla stuff right after this. And we got a full plate. We got a ton of stuff that we're going to go through. So I'm super excited. But why I ended up picking Unreal instead of all these other softwares out there and all these other, there's all these different ideas of which path you should go, is because I kept bumping up against what I call the infinite rendering problem. And this is a thing that I realized after working for 8 years at a visual effects studio. And if you've used Blender at home or you've used any CG renderer, you know that waiting for this pixelated screen of death, it is like all the creativity completely stops, and now we have to wait around for our render instead of working like you would on a film set where everything is live and you're with actors and you're with people and you can move around lights. And the problem is that visual effects happens 1 frame at a time. There are 24 frames per second for cinema, that's the standard, and visual effects happens at 1/24th. It's so slow. It is so incredibly slow. So if you have to render 24 frames for every 1 second of footage, it really starts to add up. And that's like this big problem at visual effects studios, is we have to find ways to get around the incredibly slow renders. So looking at yourself, if you had to wait around for 1 hour per frame, which is totally, that's the minimum at a visual effects studio. You're waiting minimum 1 hour per frame for your final render at a real professional visual effects studio. If you wanted to render a 10-minute movie at 1 hour per frame, how long do you think it would take you? And this is just to like open your eyes up to like why this is such a big problem. Is if it took 1 hour to render 24 frames for every 1 second of your final movie, it would take 600 days to render out a short film on your one computer. And it's just, I bring this up and I like starting with this in a lot of my live streams because the reality is, using these other softwares, it's honestly not realistic. And I just want to show you that up front because I fell for this trap. I tried to use Maya to make CG films. I used Blender to make CG films. And I always was just stuck waiting around for renders instead of creating the actual movie. And the problem with old school visual effects is the more detail you add into your scene, the longer it takes to render. So it is so slow. And every step along the way, you're having to wait for renders. So after animation, you gotta wait for your renders. After lighting, you gotta wait for your renders. After effects, you gotta wait for your renders. After compositing, you gotta wait for your renders. There's so much waiting around that it's incredible that any work gets done with the old school way of visual effects. But that's why movies take years and years to finish, and animated films end up taking 3 to 4 years to go from start to finish. And it's because it's a very slow process. And as we're going through this, like your creativity and your flow state, like what's actually going on? It's like you're not actually making progress. Every time you start to make progress, you end up staring at this horrible screen. So we want to avoid all of that. And honestly, this is why I ended up saying I cannot make visual effects studios like I would do at my day job. I have to actually find a different way to make them if I want to make films at home by myself or with small teams. So the way that now we can do it is with real-time rendering. And that is why I've gone all in on Unreal, is because you can now make these big budget films without waiting around for your final result. And this is why filmmakers and visual effects studios alike are switching over into Unreal, is because you no longer have to wait for any renders. You can have an infinite amount of geometry, an infinite amount of detail, literally billions of polygons in your scene. And at this point, the limit just becomes your own creativity. And that's what I want. I want myself and my own creative eye and my artistic ability to be the bottleneck of the thing that's holding me back. But yeah, it's so cool to see. There's so many new films being created every day with Unreal. I try to share as much as I can on my channel and all the learnings I have from my own projects. But there's photoreal styles, there's stylistic films and animated films made, like The Voice in the Hollow. I made a short film for War of Being, which just hit 1 million views, which is for the band Tesseract. And there's also great films like Sava Zivkovic's Irradiation. And it's even being used in Love, Death, and Robots, and which you might have seen on Netflix, especially if you're here and you're a film lover and filmmaker. And then obviously why I got into Unreal was to start working on set after seeing The Mandalorian and thinking of all the possibilities of using Unreal on set instead of from the side. So that is why we're picking Unreal, is because it is the best way forward. And this 10-second render, to get this out of Unreal, it took a 10-second long shot only took 20 seconds to render out. Like, that is how fast this can be. You can obviously crank up the render settings and go crazy, but if you had a 10-minute film, it would take 20 minutes to render out. And at least that way we can very quickly start to get through all of these different processes way faster than ever before. Does that make sense? Does that sound cool? I just want to touch on this because we have to know why we're using Unreal, because otherwise we're going to be dragged into all these different ways instead of actually just doubling down on this one idea that is going to make filmmaking so much easier, so much faster, because we're working in real time and we can actually start practicing our own films. So, who here wants to become a better filmmaker? That's what we're going to touch on. That is the whole point of the Godzilla Masterclass here, is that we don't need to take the traditional route. Actually, I think right here, this, if I'm not mistaken, is this the, here we go. So we got the Godzilla film here. This is the making of. This is what we're going to dive into. We're going to show all the secrets behind this entire sequence and more, because it's not just this 4-second little clip. It's going to be, we're making a full minute-long thing just to really prove out the process and show you exactly what's possible. So if you're ready, let's dive in. We're not going to focus on the traditional route. We're going to, I just want everyone to know that literally anyone out here can start working in Hollywood. I start off just like you, watching YouTube videos, watching live streams, and trying to figure out how to do this. And it took me a very long time, and I want you to learn from my mistakes. And thankfully, since 2016, I've been working in the industry at a couple different studios here in Canada, in Vancouver and Montreal, and even at ILM. So I'm trying to practice what I'm teaching, teach what I'm actually doing and using at visual effects studios, because it's very hard to find out there. And I knew how, you are my people. I was a completely self-taught artist. I just used YouTube and FX PhD to learn absolutely everything before getting into the industry. And that allowed me to eventually start working on set. I learned Unreal from scratch and on my own from tutorials and just reading the frickin' manual and doing it the hard way back with Unreal 4. And I was able to work on set for Avatar: The Last Airbender. That was a really cool production with everyone. And then even on Star Trek Discovery, which season 5 just came out, which is super cool. Got to be on set and even make films and environments for the LED volume. So this was an environment that we built over at Pixamundo. So everything I'm saying here is not just some theory of what I think is going to work. These are the methods that actually work today at visual effects studios, what I've personally used either at a visual effects studio or in my own freelance work, because I just want to get us closer to that final result so you can just use the techniques that actually work. And I've even made my own freelance projects. So making films from scratch with motion capture, with animated characters. I've done a little bit of everything, and I don't want to teach anything unless I've already done it myself, which is why it's taken a long time to get everything out. But yeah, you do not need to live in LA or New York, have industry connections, or even have a college degree. Because I started out in a small town in Wisconsin, 7,000 people, in the middle of a cornfield basically, and was completely self-taught on YouTube, and I even dropped out of college. And funny enough, Gareth Edwards, the director of Godzilla 2014, is almost the same exact way. He was a self-taught filmmaker and visual effects artist using After Effects and off-the-shelf software to make his own films for the BBC and for all these different things. So this is a clip from Gareth Edwards. I actually pulled this up today because the first course I ever, not the first course ever, but on FX PhD, it was crazy. I actually, before Gareth Edwards made Godzilla, I actually had heard of him because I had taken his After Effects course on FX PhD, and I actually was able to pull up the trailer here.
A director and visual effects artist. I recently created a film for the BBC called Abenhaim, which featured 260 visual effects shots in high definition that I created all from my bedroom on my own. And in this course, I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Basically, you'll get a chance to have an overview of my approach to create visual effects shots that you're probably more likely to see in a feature film, but instead done very quickly, very cheaply on a TV budget.
So it's crazy. I pull this up, and it's and I think a lot of us, it's almost like a time capsule from the past. But this is back using Adobe After Effects CS3, and this was right when I was transitioning between After Effects and Nuke, so I could actually have the skills to be job ready at a visual effects studio. But we're all trying to do the same thing, and Gareth Edwards was doing the same thing back in 2009. He was at home trying to figure out how to do this himself, and I think, to me, if that doesn't excite you, I don't know what to tell you, because knowing that the people out there that are actually making these big budget films started just where you are right now, I think is a huge revelation. And as I said earlier, in 2014, I was in high school. I think it was my senior year, and I was seeing an article, the follow-up, there's FX PhD and FX Guy, they're basically from the same company. But yeah, I read through all their articles and saw, wow, yeah, MPC made all these visual effects from the Godzilla film, and it just reminded me, like, dude, any one of us can actually do this. And if he can do it, why can't I? Like, what's stopping me? It really is your own creative eye, your own ability, but it's not on some external force. It's what you're capable of pulling off. And thankfully, just a year later from reading that article, I was off and shipping my way over to here in Montreal to work at MPC. And yeah, I've been able to work at quite a few studios. But that's enough about me. I want to focus back on you to share as many concrete tips as possible because yeah, I was actually a lead compositor on Godzilla vs. Kong at MPC back in 2019. These are some of the shots that I made at the time. That was my first experience as a lead compositor, and I learned a ton in that process, and I want to share as much as I can. And now that I've had the chance to make my own Godzilla film after the fact, I've had a lot of opportunity to think of how can we make these shots look as good as possible. And I want us all to be able to make these types of films by ourselves. So, and just to say this, I think with that Gareth Edwards story, I truly do believe this. I think the next generation of filmmakers and directors are not going to go up through the studio system. I truly believe it's going to be one of us on this call right here. I'm going to do my best to be in that next generation and making feature films and releasing them independently and not needing these Hollywood budgets. Like, you do not need $5 million to make a film. You can find ways to shortcut it, and that is what I've been obsessed with. And I think the next generation of great filmmakers is not, like, they're not going to come from money. They're going to come from the scrappy, independent people from small teams who are making them, who are making these films on their own. So if you haven't, if you're taking notes, we're going to jump into the Godzilla stuff literally in just a minute, but just take a second right now. This is an exercise that really helped me, and if it helps even one person out there and actually achieving that goal you're looking for of actually working at a visual effects studio that you've always wanted to work at, or just work on the game cinematics of your favorite franchise, or maybe just being your own boss. But I would encourage you right now, write down that big goal that you've been thinking about for years and it's always felt too far away. And the reason I tell everyone to do this is because when I was in college, I was briefly at film school and I dropped out in less than 6 months because it just wasn't for me. But I realized within 2 weeks of going to intro to multimedia class and reading a textbook telling me what a magazine is, that this is not the way we're gonna make films. We're gonna actually become better filmmakers by finding the best folks out there, finding the best tips from anywhere and applying them into your own work. And what I did in my college dorm room at the time was write down my bucket list of visual effects movies I always wanted to work on, and that was Star Wars, it was Spider-Man, and it was a dragon of some kind. It could have been Game of Thrones, it could have been Lord of the Rings, it could have been anything. But yeah, to me, this was the like an eye-opening thing. It kept me so focused throughout my visual effects career because I was able to work on each one of those different franchises and movies. There's a bit of luck involved, there's a bit of skill and timing and, you know, serendipity, whatever. But I truly just equate it to being so laser focused and just letting everyone know around me, like, yo, I gotta work on Star Wars, I gotta work on Dragons, I gotta work on Spider-Man, whatever it was, so that, you know, it was able to come back to me. And I'm not into some frou-frou manifestation stuff. Some people call it that, whatever you want to say. But I think it's actually just being laser focused on what you want to achieve out of visual effects and filmmaking. Because the only thing, like there's nothing in your way. Any one of us can do it. And this is the last time I say it, and then we'll get into the Godzilla stuff. But literally, I started out just like you. I cannot repeat it enough. I don't think there's just not a lot of people on YouTube who have gone through it and started as a YouTube watcher into working on Hollywood films. So if I can be just provide any sort of roadmap for anyone out there, this is the major step that actually got me there. But anyway, so let's dive into it. We've talked enough. We got the lead up. We know why we're going to use Unreal for filmmaking, and we know too it's super cool. Gareth Edwards has done it himself, but you don't need to know how to code, how to model, or how to animate. You don't need these crazy budgets. We can literally just use Unreal 5, which is completely free, and it will be free. You can always use Unreal 5.2 for free forever, and then otherwise, you know, if you make more than $1 million, you got to pay for a license. Not a big deal. But yeah. So today we're gonna go through how to make your own films without Hollywood budgets, how to make films faster, better, more efficient, and tell your story and bring it to the big screen, even if that's just a 4K monitor, and bring it out to the world and have a movie theater on YouTube. So how to go from that original idea to final film, that's gonna be our first chapter here. We're gonna walk through previs all the way to making your own film. I'm super excited for this. We're gonna show exactly how to go through that whole previs process, and I'll share some techniques I actually learned from Pixar and how they make movies. Because they're making animated movies after all. After that, we'll cover the shortcuts to build cinematic environments faster and easier than ever before. These are some really cool shortcuts, and it's basically the techniques I learned on Godzilla vs. Kong and applying it inside of Unreal. So I think you're really gonna love this. Definitely some cool tips that are gonna save you a ton of time. And then how to upgrade your renders to that Hollywood level, visual effects level. I was a feature film compositor on live action film, and we're gonna go through some really cool compositing techniques that are really easy to apply to your renders. I'll show you the exact step-by-step method to add sparks and explosions and effects and smoke and all this crazy stuff into your own renders. So you're gonna wanna stick around to that. I think the last one's actually what I'm most passionate about because I love compositing. That's my first love. But let's start with filmmaking. We're gonna talk about how you can actually start making films in a very, very tangible way. So I always start with this, is that you cannot make a film without characters. Movies are about characters. Someone has to want something, something gets in their way, and then they learn a lesson after they win, they lose, or they draw on their way to getting over this hurdle to get what they've always wanted. And that is going to be the same for every story into the future. So we got to start with Godzilla. So just to let you know where I source this and where you can actually grab this asset if you're interested and you want to literally follow along with this after. I got the Godzilla model. I'm not a character modeler myself, so I'm going to use all the resources I can find out there on the internet. That's kind of the generalist approach, is if you're not great at something, find someone else who can do it. Find an asset that exists out there. So I got this Godzilla model off of Turbo Squid. I'll probably leave a link in the description later on. You can see that the texture detail is really great here, but it's not incredibly high res, which is actually totally okay. And I found it as an interesting challenge to say, okay, this is not gonna be a billion polygons for one creature, but how can we make it look as if it has all that crazy detail up close? So, but by and large, the textures look great. The geometry is there, and this model already came with a rig. So, by the way, it's the first result. If you go to Turbo Squid, you'll find it. Type in Godzilla. It's the first one. But what was really great about this is it came with a rig. So again, it saved a lot of time. And ultimately, my big challenge here was, how can I make my own Godzilla film in just 7 days? That's like the challenge here that I gave myself about 7 days ago to try to get through this whole process. So got that model off of Turbo Squid. But if you ever want to, if you want to animate anything inside of Unreal, and we don't want to work in 2 or 3 different softwares, we want to stay in Unreal the entire time, because Unreal is in real time. So any opportunity where we're switching softwares, we're importing and exporting, we're wasting time, where if we can stay entirely in Unreal Engine for our entire workflow, that is where the time savings add up. But if you're switching between softwares, there's no point in using Unreal if you're gonna switch between different softwares. Like, we wanna find the fastest, most efficient way to make films. So if you want to animate inside of Unreal Engine, then you need to do that with Control Rig. So Control Rig is Unreal's proprietary method. You build control rigs in Unreal, but this allows you to actually manipulate your asset inside of the engine. So, and I think a huge thing that we all need to know is that the biggest thing for filmmakers is and visual effects artists alike, is you do not have to make every single thing yourself. I actually randomly, the morning I was doing this, and this is like absolutely true, I was on LinkedIn and I came across this artist, Sanal, who had made a control rig for this bug creature. And I was gonna dive in and learn control rig, but I just reached out and I sent him a DM and I was like, hey, are you interested in making this control rig? Like, I'm gonna do this project. Does that sound cool? And yeah, he was super interested. He said yes. I sent him over the model his way. And within a day, because he was already a rigging artist at DNEG, that he said, okay, cool, yeah, let me do this. He got it back to me within 1 day, and I was able to start animating right away. So I just want to say this, because a lot of people fall for this mistake of trying to do every part of the process yourself. But the reality is, it doesn't matter what resources you have or what skills you have. It matters how resourceful you can be. And oftentimes, all it takes is just sending a DM to someone, sending an email to someone. LinkedIn is great for that. Twitter is great for that. I've done it for pretty much every project, for something big or small along the way. And a lot of people know this, but they don't actually do it, which I find so funny. But it's super easy. Just like, shoot your shot. Just do it. Just ask someone who's great. Maybe they'll help you out. Maybe they won't. But the worst case is they say no, and you end up learning something yourself. But definitely, I would encourage all of you, try to work together. Like, on a film set, everyone's working together. We're not working on just alone by yourself. Like, we're making films. It's a collaborative process. So work with other people. But yeah, so if you want to animate in Unreal, I know some of you are brand new to Unreal. So if you want to animate anything in Unreal, the way you do that is through Sequencer. Sequencer is your animation timeline, and it's also your editing timeline inside of Unreal. So this is where we're going to spend all our time when we're making films in Unreal. Everything that you animate happens inside of Sequencer. But this is a huge beginner trap, and if you want to make a film, a lot of people start by animating right away. Like, I had that rig, like, it seemed like, okay, go in and just animate stuff right away. But if our goal is to make films, this is why it's a trap, is you don't want to just jump right into animation. Because for a very, very important reason, and I actually learned this by kind of going through how Pixar makes their own movies. But this is the biggest distinction that we have to make here, and definitely write this down, is there is a difference between visual effects and filmmaking. Just like there's a difference between shots and sequences. If we want to make our own films, then we need to make sequences. If we want to make visual effects, then we're working on a shot-by-shot basis. And animation is part of the visual effects process. It's not part of the filmmaking process. We can argue back and forth, but for this first lesson, I think it's an important distinction to make. When you're first making a sequence, if you go right into the animation, we're putting the cart before the horse. We're doing the second step before we've made our sequence, before we know that our film even works in the first place. And this was a lesson that I've been constantly reminded of, and it's easy to forget. But yeah, films are sequences. They're not shots. They are stories told, and a sequence is just a series of shots back to back to back. So visual effects add up into sequences, but we need to make the sequence before we make visual effects. This is super, super important here. Even though it sounds basic, but I cannot tell you how many times I've made this mistake and everyone ends up not finishing their projects because they focus on the visual effects first instead of the film itself. So the way around this, and the thing to put first, the most important thing here, is that we need to create a story reel. And this could be like another word for this might be storyboard or an animatic, or just a sequence. We're just gonna make a sequence using boards here. And one thing I'm gonna do, I just wanna make sure, I'm gonna switch over my mic settings here super quick because I'm gonna share some cinematics here, or animatics from Pixar to show you how they make films. And they have tried, I wanna listen to the people that have made 20 animated films. I don't wanna just make all the mistakes myself. So that is what I did. And actually a great book for any of you folks out there who want to even dive in deeper is Creativity Inc. is a book I read over Christmas break. It's by Ed Catmull, who's one of basically the founding fathers of modern CGI, and he was the president of Pixar. And you know, it was nothing new. You hear over and over again, yeah, you got to do storyboards, you got to make previs and all this stuff. Sure, you hear it. But it's very easy to forget that you can just skip over this. And Pixar does it every time. They actually the way they write their films is they have the screenwriter inside of what they call the story department, where it's not just a screenwriter writing a script. It's a screenwriter and a storyboard artist making storyboards. And that's how they actually review the script. It's not by reading the script on its own. It's by taking these still frames, having the two departments or two artists working together, and only until they want to watch the film to see if it works. They don't want to just see if it works on the written page. And in animation, this is super important. Now, the goal is not to just make a comic strip, and don't worry, you don't have to draw. I'll show you how to do this in Unreal. But this is the process we want to take. And the reason why is films and cinema is the combination of video and sound. If we just jump right into the animation and that side of things, we just focus on the video and the images, we're not worrying about the soundtrack, about the music, about the pacing, the actual rhythm of your film. And so many people they jump right into the end because we're in Unreal, we're visual effects artists first for some of us out there. I definitely, that was my proclivity, was to jump into the visual effects and the visual side of things first. But films are a marriage of the two together. It's not one or the other. You absolutely need both. So that's why we want to create a story reel first and foremost. It's super, super important here. So I'm going to actually share this. Let's watch this together. This is a story reel from Toy Story 3. This is the drawn version, but I want to actually just show you how they make their films. So this is actually from a great video essay from the screenwriter of Toy Story 3, Michael Arndt. He has a YouTube channel. It's super hidden. This video has 40,000 views, and it's one of the greatest masterclasses on writing I've ever seen in my life. So again, for those of you taking notes who actually are gonna apply this and take this seriously and probably make a film in the next 2 weeks, you're gonna wanna watch this because he breaks down his story process and shows how the screenwriter and the story department work together. But let's take a look at this sequence from Toy Story 3. This, if some of you haven't seen Toy Story 3 or it's been a while, this scene happens when the toys get taken from Andy's room. So Andy goes off to college, so his toys are left, and they end up donating them to a daycare, I believe. So this is when the crew, Woody, Buzz, Bo Peep, Rex, Slinky Dog, Mr. Potato Head, everyone is at the daycare for the first time, and they're looking forward, like, hey guys, it's gonna be awesome. Kids are gonna play with us. Andy left us, but now the next kids are gonna play with us. So let's take a look and watch this together.
They're here! They're finally here! Ah, I'm gonna be playing with... Rex?
New toys.
Cool. So that is part of their story process. Is they have the scene, they have the idea, but they don't want to just see if it works on the page. They want to put music behind this. They want to show the different gags. They want to have an idea of how this scene is going to play out. They want to show the kids using the doll's hair as a paintbrush. They want to see if these things actually work, especially in a comedy film. And Pixar's movies have so much life and energy, and they're obviously really special in their own unique way. And it's because they put this storyboarding process first. And for Pixar, and we're talking about an Oscar award-winning studio here, where they're making some of the best films of the year, of the decade even, they're actually spending sometimes 2 to 3 years in this storyboarding phase. That is how important it is to get the story right first, before they jump into the animation and visual effects side of it. Because the animation side, for them, they're using the old school visual effects pipeline. It is incredibly expensive. They need like thousands of artists to make these films work. But yeah, we can not like learn from their mistakes, but learn on where they're putting their effort and energy into first. And that's why it's super important, is that if it doesn't work at this animatic or story reel level, then you can make it look as good as you want. You can light it better than anyone else, but it's not really gonna matter because your story doesn't work, your film doesn't work. And this is why I wanna put the attention on making the sequences first. So we wanna create the video and sound before the visual effects. That is the key component here. We need the video and the music and the pacing and the rhythm of music and sound together, not just still images. So don't worry, we don't need to draw in order to do this. It's actually, I found a really fun process and how you can do this yourself inside of Unreal. So yeah, we don't need to draw. We can actually create screenshots in our Unreal viewport and very, very quickly try out different ideas, throw them into our editing software and into our timeline so we can throw in music and sound effects and see if our film works at this basic level before we spend all our time finishing the film. We want to make that film great in the first place. So these are the steps, and we're going to get into each of these here. So if you want to create a storyboard, a story reel, all these words are just interchangeable. I like the word story reel because it assumes it's like a film reel. It's moving images and sound instead of a storyboard, which is I guess more traditionally like more of like a comic strip. It's images on a page. So we don't want images on a page either. We actually want this in a timeline so we can watch it like a movie. So the steps to do this is we're going to screenshot our viewport. We're going to add these shots into our editing software. So I use Premiere for this. I don't keep it in Unreal. I put it in the editing software that I'm most comfortable with. I'm going to add in stills and clips from other movies as I'm trying to find out the right pacing and the right timing and see what I like. Like maybe there's a clip that you love or a shot that you love. Instead of just, spending a bunch of time to see if it even works in Unreal, you could just grab that clip because we're just trying to see if overall that this sequence makes sense and if it feels like the vision you're trying to make. Then we'll add in the music and sound effects, and then we'll continue to slide things back and forth, edit, and rinse and repeat this process until that story reel is done. And again, these are 5 steps here to do it really quickly. I would write each one of these down. You can go back and pause this if you missed that. But the idea here is we're going to go into Unreal, and this is literally what I did on this project. So we have our wide shot. We're going into the city. We have Godzilla about to attack the city. We have our lone pilot going in. I actually changed the story in the middle of this, and that's kind of why we want to do it at the screenshot level. I was going to have, it was started as all planes, but anyway, we have our pilot going in and about to attack Godzilla. We get a close-up of our shot of our pilot. We have him swoop in and start attacking and shooting tracer fires and gunfire over at Godzilla. He swoops around and Godzilla swats at him as he moves around, and he turns as he's about to attack everything else, and then just ends with screaming into the sky. So this is like the very first version. This is literally version 1 of this screenshot animatic where I was trying to figure this out. These are the stills from it. And this was just for me to see, like, okay, does this work at all? What doesn't work? I realized, like, yeah, the pilot doesn't have any clear objective here, so how can we add that? I was thinking, is like, how do we make this feel more important and more character-centric? Because it is just truly a pretty black and white action scene. So those were the things I realized from this first pass of just getting images together, screenshotting everything in Unreal, and trying to see what works. And talking about filmmaking here and telling a story on your own, I find that filmmaking to me is all about perspective or point of view. So I want to, as a film watcher and as a director and filmmaker, I want to make sure that this film feels like it's coming from someone's point of view. Like this character is there in the story and everything is coming from this one specific point of view. And I think that just makes the whole film feel more relatable to one character. Because if it's just a city of people screaming and getting attacked and we're not attached to any one person, then, what is the story there? Like it's more just this chaotic sequence about a city being killed instead of a person. So that was a problem there. And I want to share something that helped me kind of understand this part of the process that I went through in my Last of Us short film, which if you haven't watched, you can check out on my channel. It's one of the first things, but it's Stay. It's an original story based on The Last of Us, but I made this before The Last of Us TV show and, was really focused on how can I tell a story, but also tell an action scene in it. But one exercise I went through here, if you're brand new to this and you're like, okay, it's a little intimidating and, we can do that, but I'm not sure if I have the eye for composition. All the things, again, we're learning a lot of skills all at once. So one exercise I did really early on for that film was I actually watched through 28 days later and I kind of reverse engineered a story reel. I actually took screenshots of every single shot in this sequence. So it's this opening action sequence where there's a stranger and then a mother and a child, and the stranger wakes up, they kind of wake up at different times, and then the zombie apocalypse has started. So he makes his escape. So I'll kind of walk through this here. So at the top left, we have our character here going through this window. He climbs out. Then we get a wide shot showing on the top right here. We have this wide shot showing the entire street. So we get a sense and an idea of where he's at in the sequence. He tumbles off the roof. He hurts his knee, which means like, oh crap, now he's going to struggle to run away from the zombies. He looks out down the horizon and he sees that the zombies are already running his way. And then we just get all these close-up shots of him, his face, his reaction. So we start to get up close and personal with him. The zombies start running away. As he left that window, the door shut behind him and now it's jammed. So the mother and child that were left in that house are now stuck behind this window. So you can see that on the top right. Now she's stuck behind this window and she can't get out. Our main character, the guy that we're with, like the perspective that we're from, he continues to run away and we see him look around. Like literally, if you look at this shot, he's running away. And then we, from behind him, see him turn around to look back. And then we, in between these two shots here on screen right, the first shot, she's closer, and in the second shot, she's further away. So as he runs further away, she actually goes, whatever. The framing of her and the camera also goes further away. So, and then he obviously escapes out on his own. She gets left behind. It's really sad. It's part of the opening. And then he ends up running away from these field of zombies. And then further on we get into the sequence, we actually flip away from our main character's point of view. And then we have this wide shot of the zombies running over the field. And then all of a sudden we snap to the perspective of the zombies as they're trying to hunt him down. And then we flip perspective in the middle of this sequence. We see them tracking him down. The zombies get closer, and suddenly now we're in this middle shot here. Now we're behind him, as if the cameraman and the camera operator are literally the zombies getting closer to the main character about to kill him. So I just want to walk through this to show you how you can use that camera and the perspective as a filmmaker, as a director, or just where the camera is, the camera and where it is, the point of view of the camera, it does a lot of the storytelling for you. So if we apply this now to Godzilla, whose perspective or point of view should our shots be from? In that first series of images, everything was from the point of view of this pilot. It was high up in the air, but I was trying to think, like, what's the scariest point of view it could possibly be? And to me, the absolute scariest idea is if literally you're running down a city street, you look up and the biggest monster you've ever seen is destroying skyscrapers and nudging through them and breaking through the entire city that you know and love. So I figured that, like, through that storyboarding process, I was like, dang, so I don't really have any perspective from the ground. I have no way to really make it personal at that point. So I went back at that stage and added in 3 or 4 shots at the beginning to tell the story of, you know, what it's like on the ground. What is the destruction like from someone in the city? And that's the shots that I'll share throughout the rest of this presentation here. So that's how perspective can help us. So these were a couple shots I went back to capture. This shot starts pointing down, and then we pan up to see Godzilla from the point of view of someone on the ground. And then I even went in and added a crowd so they can run further away. And we can stay there on the ground at the level of someone on the street and see what the destruction would look like from their perspective. Does that sound cool? Does that sound like that at least makes sense? And hopefully gives you some pointers on how you can tell better stories with your cameras. I hope that helps there. And then another tactic here, we'll go into the tactic side of how do we do this even further in Unreal? How do we organize our scene in Unreal to do this super, super fast and super efficiently? So the best way to do that is going to be what I call, especially when you're starting out here, we have control rig, we have the ability to manipulate our character now. But again, we don't want to animate at the beginning. We can get into animation once we have our screenshot animatic working. But if that doesn't work, again, there's just no point to get into animation yet. So what I would suggest is just start out with posing. Don't animate every step. And this is a great example, I think, of what the difference is between, like, the poses tell the story for you. The animation is another part of it. And obviously it definitely helps tell the story once we're happy with the sequence and the pacing of it. But look at the pose between this shot and this shot. I'll flip back between the two here. So we have Godzilla standing upright, standing stoic. He's on his own versus crying out at the sky. And you can almost see, like, he'd almost be looking at the other planes that are flying around him. And again, that all comes from the pose itself. It's not coming from, that's just the way we can tell that in a single screenshot. So we want to create a camera for every angle as we're doing this. So actually, I might have this a little out of order. I just want to make sure this is as clear as possible. So the specific thing you want to know here is that we want to start with the poses first. And for those of you that have used Unreal, you want to make one sequencer timeline for every pose. So each sequencer asset in your scene at this previs stage, as you're blocking out your film, is going to be one sequence for one pose. So that way you're not worrying about animating it. And then once you have that pose locked in and it's at least close to what you're happy with, then we want to go in and make cameras. We want to create a new camera for every single angle. This makes it a lot easier to go back and find your different ideas, because when I'm doing this process, I literally am making like 30 or 40 cameras per shot. That's what I was doing on War of Being, at least, was literally like so many cameras because I'm trying this out. I'm trying to be creative. I don't want to get stuck in with one idea. I'm literally finding my film, and I don't want to just take the first option I have. What's so cool about working in real time is you can find it like a documentary filmmaker, like a photographer, or like a stunt coordinator or director on set. Is like, okay, no, the actor needs to move over here. That means the camera needs to move over here, and it's this organic process of kind of moving everything around the scene at the same time. So that's why we want each pose and each setup in its own sequence, but we want to create a brand new camera, like a new Cine camera in Unreal for every single angle. So the very fast way to do this is you can actually make a custom hotkey to take your active viewport in your scene, and instantly you can make a new camera from that point of view. So you can just move around using WASD in Unreal.
Any option
and by making this custom hotkey, you can instantly make a new camera from your point of view. So there's a button to do this here. So just to pause on that, you can do this in Sequencer. Literally, it says create a new camera from this view. That's what this button does here.
If I go to editor preferences.
If you go into your editor preferences and you just type in camera at the top, you can create a custom hotkey to create a new camera. So I set this personally to Control Shift Alt C, which is kind of like an annoying hotkey. And the idea there is because I don't want to press it on accident, but I can just like, I can WASD around, and then literally without moving my hand, I can do Control Alt Shift C. It's a really small thing here, but this is a way to get super, super fast in Unreal and during this animatic phase, so you can just focus on creative camera choices instead of like, okay, I got to screenshot this, I got to render this out, yada, yada, yada. It's like, no, okay, make a camera, screenshot it, boom. And then you can even make the snipping tool in Windows or Mac. When you take a screenshot, you literally just drag over the frame, and now it automatically saves that to your disk. So that way, you don't spend any time saving it, you don't spend any time rendering it, you create a new camera, and then you render it out. So what it looks like in practice, and this isn't the War of Being scene here, I'm just fishing around to find an interesting composition. I hit Control Alt Shift C, and it creates a new camera. Now this camera came in with this little lightning bolt icon,
and that just means that this is...
and then, so if we do that, so the idea here is we create a level sequence for each pose, and then we create a camera for each shot. So each shot is going to have lots of cameras in it. You're going to have a lot of cameras. Literally, if you're making a sequence, you will probably or should probably have like hundreds of cameras trying out these different ideas, so you can collect your screenshots and throw them into your editing timeline. And what this looks like in practice here, kind of going through the whole process, is I was going to dive in deeper about animation in this talk, but I'm already trying to cover a lot, so maybe for the next one. But additive tracks are a really great thing where you can add different layers of animation. So you could add you could have Godzilla stepping in one animation track, and then you can make an additive layer to add his head shake and that wobble or his hands moving and giving it extra weight. You can add that secondary animation to things, which is really, really cool. So once you're kind of done with your screenshots and you're happy with how that previs sequence is working, then you can start going in and animating your character from there, but only after you're happy with your sequence overall. So that's where these additive tracks are really nice. And again, we're just blocking it out. We're trying to figure out the timing of the camera and the characters together. This is a whole next step. We're kind of going from a story reel to your previs at this point. And this is when your film is actually going to start to come together. So I have a really great preset. Just make a movie render queue preset so that you are always using the same one each time. I have one that's just a 1 second, like one frame takes 1/24 of a second to render. It's super, super fast. So that's what I did on these shots. And then literally, I just go in, I take the footage that I just rendered out of Unreal, and then I import the clips. And this would be the same for the images, but this is how to import clips here. So literally, if you use Premiere, you can import your footage, and then if you Alt click and drag into your timeline, you can replace the previous clip. So you could basically, how I did this entire previs is the first go around. You're doing that first block out, that first pass of previs, and it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be a bit crude, and it's not going to quite work. And then you're going to basically go through 2 or 3 or even multiple rounds of previs once you're kind of getting into the animation side of making this sequence. So you'll kind of go through, make a first pass of the animation for everything to create the previs next. And this is also, I kind of skip past it, but at this point, you're going to have your soundtrack, you're going to have your sound effects and your music, and you're going to figure out the pacing. And now you're trying to animate that and bring it to life. So for Godzilla, I added the sound effects of him stomping through the city, but now I have to go back and actually animate it and match it to the timing of my storyboard or my story reel. So that is what this process looks like here, is then updating each of these shots with brand new renders and continuing to plus up each shot over and over and over again until you go from a story reel into an actual finished previs where you're having that first pass of animation. It's not just screenshots anymore. We start with screenshots, and once we're happy, we go into simple previs animations. And actually, sorry, I cut that a little bit early just to kind of see that whole process. Yeah, we render that out. We import these clips into Premiere. You alt-click and drag them into your timeline, and now you can start watching your whole animation as it comes together. So I think the next clip here is literally that first previs. So it's always uncomfortable to share your work in progress work. So this is the work in progress. This is where I ended up with the story reel to say like, okay, at least there's a first pass here that fundamentally this is what I'm going for. So, you know, this is previs, but I'll let it play here. So there we go. That was the finished previs, and obviously it is rough. Like that is the point, to be sure. But we got to start somewhere, right? So that is how you can go from just an idea and from start to finish, go from an idea in your head into laying out shots in Unreal, creating screenshots to create that story reel, and then eventually that first pass of previs, all in one go. So does that sound cool? Does that help you actually give you some concrete steps to make your first storyboard and essentially make that first film in Unreal? Because honestly, anyone out here can do this. Like there's no real technical hurdles, and the control rig side of things is going to become even easier in Unreal 5.4, which is literally coming out in a week now. Well, they're going to create modular control rigs so you can drag and drop these rigs onto existing characters. So it's going to become even easier here. But yeah, I hope that helps at least really uncover the previs and animatic process in Unreal. And this is what I now do every time. This is kind of the refined version as I figured out my own workflow, but I did the same thing on War of Being. I've done the same thing in the past, and this is absolutely how I would recommend anyone do this in the future. This is now my go-to process. So I hope that helps there. That at least gives you some good ideas. And then from here, we're going from the filmmaking side into visual effects. So we're gonna refine that animation. We're gonna make sure, we're gonna tighten up everything. And you're not locked into this edit like you don't have to match this edit perfectly. As you animate shots, you'll continue to go back and forth in this next stage here. But at least the foundations of what you're building, like a film it takes so long to make, to really, you know, for live action films and animated films, when we're making a 90-minute feature-length film, it takes so long to make. But this is like totally a process where we could put this together in just 3 days here. And now we're building the skyscraper. We have really deep foundations. And now the next part of this can go by super, super fast because we know what we're making. We know the film at its core is at least like achieving what my goals were for this short piece. And now we're ready to go into the visual effects side of refining this and making it look like a Hollywood film. So that's the next step here. So we're gonna dive in. We're not just talking about previs here. That whole next chapter is how to make our films look better than ever. And we're gonna talk about character animation next. Oh dang, I was finishing this up right before we got here, but I did forget to include the chapter here. I pulled the meeting, but there's another moment where I try to send out DMs to anyone that I think has great work. Personally, I want to make connections. I want to work with great people at any point. And we're all going to be in this filmmaking game and visual effects industry for a very long time. I'm not going to I'll go to my grave making films. I just know that that's how much I love it, and I think a lot of people out there are just as psychotic and crazy like me. So I like to get in touch with people that I think have done great work, and I got in touch with John. Oh my God, I'm totally blanking on your last name, dude. I'm so sorry. But he's on Watch Me Animate. I don't want to say it incorrectly, but John Heim does a really great job. His channel is Watch Me Animate. Definitely go over there, just open it in a new tab so you can save it for later. But I reached out to him to see if he was also interested in trying to take this previs to the next level. And again, I was able to pull off this whole film with just 3 people, one of them being myself. And if you think about a film set, you're gonna have 10, 20, or even 50 people. So the fact that we could pull this off with just 3 people in the end, with each person focusing on what they're best at, I think is the framework for making films in Unreal. It's not only doing everything yourself, and you would be shocked how many people are totally down to work on your projects for free if it sounds like a cool project. Because a lot of people, myself included, I will still do free work to this day if I love the project. It's got to be the right project, but I think a lot of people are that way, and a lot of times you're doing this client work for your day job, and you want to take your own work and your personal work, you kind of want to express your own ideas, and that's why I love working with people, is not to be a dictator and enforce only my ideas on what something has to look like. I love working with people, letting them do what they're best at, give their point of view and their vision into a sequence, and then everyone has a much better time. So that's what I did on this project. I had the clip here, literally of the first meeting, but it was so funny. I reached out to John and was like, "Hey, dude, you want to help out?" He did some really great work in Maya and 3ds Max originally. I was like, "Dude, I'm trying to do this film in just 7 days. Do you want to help me out?" He's like, "Dude, I'm totally down. The only problem is I don't know Unreal." So he just had never used Unreal for cinematics. So I was able to, in just a day, just teach him through everything, go through a crash course, because ultimately it's not a crazy long process. It goes beyond the scope of this one talk here, and I'm sure we'll cover that in future videos and live streams and great stuff like that. But yeah, he was able to get up to speed for the first time really using Unreal for cinematics in just a single day. You just need to know the couple areas of what you need to look at, but ultimately we're just working in Sequencer and using the curve graph and the curve editor to animate characters. That's fundamentally all we're doing there. And then obviously he's a great animator, so he has that artistic touch to push it to the next level. But I had some clips there, so sorry, that didn't make the final presentation. But we're gonna go over to what I finished off. So we kind of divided and conquered on this. Now that the film was there, he went off to polish up the animation, and I focused in on making environments. So this next chapter is the shortcuts to build cinematic environments faster and easier, and all of the shortcuts I took to not sacrifice on quality, but do it as fast as possible. And I think there's gonna be some great tips, things that I learned at Visual Effects Studios working on Godzilla vs. Kong, and was able to apply it to this sequence. So yeah, this is some of those shots from Godzilla vs. Kong. So I had the advantage. This is obviously not the first time I'm working on a nighttime city with Godzilla. So I got to learn quite a few things on what makes what's that secret sauce to make cities look realistic and also interesting and cinematic. Yeah, we'll get into each of those, but this is just some of the work that I had done over at MPC for that film. But a really important thing here, it was true then, it was true now. Just because I did all of those shots doesn't mean I should skip over the stage of gathering reference. Whenever I'm starting a project and I'm trying to make something look photoreal, just like real life, there is no alternative to finding great reference. I repeat this a lot, and if any of you are sick of it, good, because you should be sick of hearing it. You need to just know automatically when you start a project, gather reference every single time. The amateurs skip over this, but professionals, I swear, anyone here that has worked at a visual effects studio, you know that you start by gathering reference every single time. And this was no exception. So my favorite go-to site for this is unsplash.com. They have some really great high-res images, like 8K photographs. And this is one of Hong Kong. where you can see the city at night. You see all of the tiny little lights in the office buildings. You see the neon signs. We got the foggy lights. We got the reflections over the water. There's lots of really cool parts of this image. And at this point, it's just really fun to look and analyze of like, okay, what are all these little details that make this shot interesting? And then you obviously want to look up close, and we can see, yeah, all these office buildings, you know, they have reflections on them. Like down here at the bottom of the frame, you can see that literally there's like these warbly glass reflections on the bottom left. But in the concrete part of these buildings are getting color from the sign. So we have a red sign and a blue sign, and that's why there's this purple light over the buildings. But inside, there's a lot of yellow light coming from the office buildings inside. So these are like the big things at play. Is we're gonna have neon lights, these super bright neon lights that are casting light onto our scene. We need the office buildings to add that scale, like these really small rooms, and we're gonna need to build like hundreds of them inside these buildings. So that's sort of a challenge here that we're gonna have to figure out. And then also this, it's interesting too, this yellow neon sign in the back, you can see that this is darker than these really bright red and blue neon signs because you can actually, it's not overexposed. So this red neon sign, it's red, and you can see it's red because of the fog, but the actual pixels here are literally white. So some of these signs are brighter than others, so we can really play with the brightness of our lights over in general. It's a thing that you definitely just need to get experience with if you have used a photo, like a photo camera and have gone out and taken photographs yourself. You'll get a very good eye for exposure. Again, it's just a bit too much to get into right here, but I find that the difference between good and great artists, compositors, lighters, filmmakers is that you do need to learn how to see. You need to develop your creative eye, and that comes from analyzing images and also capturing images, videos, photographs out in the real world. So another thing I did on this, I live in Montreal, and so Chinatown is right down the street from where I live. So I before I started on anything, I wanted to go downtown and see it with my own eyes. I didn't want to just look at photographs. I wanted to see, what does this scene look like? What are the details I notice that aren't visible in the camera? So this is footage that I took when I was downtown. You can see that the green light is cast super brightly on the buildings. And you can see one of my biggest regrets from Godzilla vs. Kong, this was not my call to make, but one thing that I just always regretted after the fact is I find that if you have a really blue sky, like it's nighttime here, the buildings are black, but if you have this blue sky in the background, the buildings just start to pop off from the background in a really interesting way. You can start to build depth that way versus some of these nighttime photographs here where the sky is completely black and it can be very hard to see any detail. So that was one thing that I had my chance to make this myself. I wanted to include that part of it. I went down to Chinatown at this specific time of day to see what the difference is and not go at like 3 a.m. in the morning, but go at like 7 p.m. to see it with blue hour sky. So there's still some brightness left in the sky because that was the look I wanted to go for in this sequence. So that was the reference. That's how I figured out, okay, this is what I'm trying to build. But the next step here is now we actually got to create the environment. So the biggest help on this specific project was a pack from bigmediumsmall.com. So I think there's a link in the description where you can check that out if you want to see this pack. I would click that and check that out. But yeah, they had a bunch of great buildings. There's about 6 here, which is a really great start. And they had completely built out storefronts. So this was really good for those street level shots. They also had lots of characters and people on bikes and things like that. And like a pack like this, I think it's $200 or something like this. And some people definitely get a little afraid of spending money on assets like this, but if you just think of how much it would cost to block down a city street, to say, hey, no cars or businesses can operate on the street while we're filming, that's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to shoot on a night like that. And if you actually had to build all these buildings yourself, it would take you literally weeks and weeks and weeks. So spending $200, which is like one person's day working for 25 bucks an hour, it's 8 hours at 25 bucks an hour. Like, I'm going to pay that every single time personally. I mean, not everyone needs to do it. It depends on your project. But to me, it's a lot of these assets, even though they might seem expensive at first, like honestly, when you actually break down, if you had to build every single asset yourself, it's like, dude, This is a steal. So I went with this pack to at least give me a head start on the project. And then I also, for the background buildings, like there's not that many buildings here. There's only 6. And if this worked on the street level to build out this entire environment. But when I pulled out to the wide shots and I'm seeing the entire city on its own, it just wasn't enough, and you could start to tell that I was repeating buildings. So I did a mix here between the big, medium, small assets, which are much higher quality than Kit Bash. If I'm just being like 100% honest, it's way higher quality. Kit Bash stuff doesn't necessarily hold up close, but I use these Kit Bash buildings for the far background. So I think it's from the Neo Shanghai pack, but honestly, it could be from ArtStation or it could be from CG Trader or Turbo Squid. It doesn't really matter where you're sourcing any of these, but I would encourage you, like, just think about how much time you want to save, or if you want to learn the skills to build environments and model, then definitely go for it. But to me, I'm trying to make films first and foremost. So if I can find great resources out there, I'm going to try to find the best stuff and use it in my own projects. So that's how I kind of broke down this to assemble the city. I was looking back at all the time lapses of stuff that I recorded for this, and I couldn't find a direct one of me actually duplicating out all the buildings for this. I think there's one later on, but the big technique I want to force on here, because there's lots of, like, if there's one thing you can find on YouTube, it's how to duplicate buildings to build a city in Unreal. Like, that's environment building 101. You duplicate it, you rotate things, you scale them up and down. Cool. That is honestly environment building when you have assets. That's not very novel. But one thing that I think a lot of people look past, or maybe they just don't realize it at all, especially if you're brand new to Unreal, is matte painting. So instead of literally having a 3D asset for every building in your entire scene, you can just use images, like real life images, real photographs, like this exact image that I found from unsplash.com. I was like, yo, what if I just put this in the deep background? So instead of literally modeling every single building, like hundreds and hundreds of buildings, I was like, okay, dude, I'm just literally going to scale this up, drag this image into the background, try out different textures, tint them different colors, move them further back into the background, see what works. The big takeaway here that you have to know is if you're using real images, that the perspective has to match between your the photograph and the camera angle that you're trying to create. But if I'm adding these into the very far background, it's very forgiving. We get all of this small detail without doing any extra work. And it's gonna look more realistic because it's a real photograph. It's gonna be way faster because we can source them from the internet. Unsplash is completely free for copyrighted images as well, for copyrighted use, which is why I specifically use them all the time. They're also a Montreal brand, so there you go, that's fun. And then, yeah, taking that, modifying it slightly, just multiplying a yellow color by it, and then actually covering it with other buildings. So not just saying, okay, my entire background is gonna be DMP, but I'm gonna place some DMP. Some DMP just stands for digital matte painting. I'm gonna place my matte paintings and my photographs in the background, and then I can continue placing buildings in front of it so you can't tell where one starts and the other ends. So I would highly recommend start using this on any project out there, whether it's a forest, whether it's a sci-fi city, whether it's a real life city like Hong Kong or something in Tokyo. Definitely start using this because it's gonna save you so much time, and you're gonna think like, wow, I wasted so much time in the past trying to build every single thing from scratch. So the next thing here was, with those Kit Bash models specifically, is they didn't have any office buildings inside of them. So I had to find a way to build all of the little yellow lights, and you can see there's some really bright light sources inside of the office buildings. It's basically like staring right at a light bulb, because we can see like the fluorescent lights in the top left there. I'm not sure if this will work. This might go black, I'm not sure, but if this works, you can start to see all these tiny little fluorescent lights in our scene. Okay, it did go black there. All right, well, I tried. But yeah, so that is the idea here. So instead of modeling every single one of these buildings, I figured it would be much faster to just take images of interiors of buildings and turn them into decals. So most people think of decals for like bullet decals, where you shoot a gun and then you just place a decal on top of your environment. You can just place a texture on top of any object in your scene. That's all a decal is for any of you who don't know decals in Unreal. It's just a way to stamp any texture on top of multiple objects. So you don't have to UV anything, you just project this image onto another image. A lot of people like to call them decals as well, but they are decals. first and foremost. I don't know if that's a Canadian thing, but regardless. So this is the material. It's a deferred decal. You make it translucent. That's all it is. And it's just images of interiors that we're going to stamp on top of buildings. And when they're far away, again, this is very forgiving. And the reflections end up staying on top. So literally, I can just start projecting these, intersecting them with different parts of the building. You can see that they get reflected. So we're getting proper reflections on these glass windows. So by mixing this decal with glass surfaces and just projecting it on top of glass surfaces, very, very quickly, I don't have to model anything. I'm just focusing on image textures, and I can build this in a really fast and efficient way. Again, we're looking for shortcuts where we're not sacrificing on quality, but we're getting really high, we're just getting really great results. And I mean, this is as valid a technique as you'd find anywhere. I don't think they're literally using this exact technique on at visual effects studios, but we're using images whenever you possibly can when you're at a visual effects studio. And very, very quickly, you can start adding that randomness and that detail to all of the buildings in the background. And then you can even copy all of these. So I took all the decals from this one building and literally hit Control D and duplicate them to drag them over to other buildings. So I can build it even faster, where I don't just have to manually place like 10 every single time. I can just hop back and forth and quickly apply decals on any building. Is that cool? Is that like a cool technique? I felt, I wasn't sure if it would work as much as I was hoping for, but honestly, it kind of just worked right out of the box as nice as I was hoping it would. And then the last technique here, this is something that I really started to learn and developed on Godzilla versus Kong. And it's not like this, it's not like I invented a brand new technique. I'm taking a technique that everyone probably knows, but I'm applying it in a really unique way. So people know like the concept of volumetric fog, of fog in the air. We have those really bright neon signs that cast light into our environment. And those are really great, but it's very hard to control that type of light in Unreal. Unreal's volumetric fog system is really great. The old school way of visual effects, fog takes forever to render out. So at least it's fast in Unreal, but it's still very hard to control. So I used a technique that I call glow cards or fog cards, which if you followed along with the Dune Masterclass is very much like cloud cards, except instead of a cloud texture, we're going to add the texture of volumetric fog, of like those neon signs blowing out and glowing onto our environment, just like we're seeing in this real image here. Excuse me. So yeah, it's just a really soft blurred out texture where I'm using a depth node, a depth fade node, so I can spread it across several city blocks instead of keeping it restricted to just one city street. And then I can duplicate this all over the place. So I'm gonna add yellow ones around the sodium lights and the things that you'd find at the street level. I'm gonna add yellow ones to the bottom, and then I'm gonna add red and blue neon ones around the other signs. So it's the best way to do this is to mix and match what looks good around these neon signs. And also, you want to match the color to neon signs. And if there's no neon signs in this case, I was like, okay, then I'm just going to continue adding them into our scene. So I added the red ones by the red lights. I started adding blue and purple ones and green ones. And very, very quickly, I could start to add a ton of atmosphere. This also really helps when I had Godzilla walking down this huge city street, is I needed a way for this to feel like Godzilla was passing by all these different storefronts. So this clip goes by very quickly here, but the way that worked is I just added a glow card around the opening of this shop, which is like this yellow light coming from it. And then I could use that to silhouette the foot of Godzilla. So his foot feels way closer to the camera than his tail because there'd be all this dense fog in between the two. So by layering that and also tying this in with some explosions, I took some and I made them orange where I wanted to add some impact. So I added an orange light and then I made an orange glow card and matched the two together in the same exact spot. So I could add this really bright impact that looks completely real, but it took a fraction of the time to create. But we get all of the detail and all the things that you'd want out of that sort of light interaction there. So it really simplified this process to add depth and fog into my scene, but I have full creative control the entire time. I hope that helps. I hope that's like something that took me a very long time to learn. That was one, like, I felt like I was 5 or 6 years into my comp journey, but it's super cool because what would take me literally days to render out in Nuke. I would just do this manually in Nuke and place these cards in my 3D scene at the compositing phase. You can apply it in real time in your 3D scene, and you can take any material, bring it into sequencer, change the brightness so I could animate that explosion, animate the glow card brighter and then darker by just setting up 3 keyframes inside a sequencer, everything working super fast, all in real time. Does that sound cool? I hope that's a pretty big one. Again, a lot of these I feel like they're magic tricks, and once you know the magic trick, they might not seem as special once you know them, but now it is your responsibility. Like, my dad was literally a professional magician before I was born. So literally it is your responsibility now to use this and be the magician and like make this magic trick for your own film's audiences. Like, use these for good, and these are super, super powerful, very simple to use, but very effective to add a lot of depth and volumetric fog into your scene, but it takes 0 time at all to apply. All right, cool. So with that, do you think that'll help you build better looking environments? Right now we got our storyboard, we got our story reel. Now we know how to make the scene look awesome. We got a little intro to the animation side, so we can actually start applying this all together. And then the last chapter here that I want to touch on is the skip that 90% of Unreal artists skip over. And this is the method to upgrade your renders to Hollywood level visual effects inside of, well, not inside of Unreal. We're actually going to use a second software because Unreal is super, super powerful, but everything you saw so far was rendered out on a 3080 GPU, not even a 3090, which a 3080 to a 3090 is a huge upgrade. And if you go to a 4090 and above, it's even bigger. But everything was pushed to the limit on a consumer level graphics card. Nothing fancy here. But I want to push this even further. I want to take this to the next level. I want to add in smoke and sparks and effects and Godzilla's breath and things like that to take this to the next level. So that's what we're going to cover here, is how to add stock footage to get photorealistic visual effects in a super, super simple way. If you've been taking notes, this is the time to like write this down and don't forget it. I'm gonna give this cheat code, and this recording, by the way, is going offline Sunday night. So like, remember this, take screenshots, whatever you need, take this home with you. But you need to do 3 things to add stock footage into your shots, and it's only 3 things, and we'll walk through every single step here. So the first thing you're gonna do is export your camera from Sequencer. So you have your camera created in Sequencer, you have your animation in Sequencer. We're just gonna right click on it and export it as an FBX. Then we're also going to render out a depth pass and a position pass out of Unreal. If you don't know what this is, don't worry yet. We'll break everything down. It's super simple. And then lastly, inside of Nuke, which is just, After Effects is a compositing software, Nuke is a compositing software, and a thing that I didn't realize early on in my career. I was watching Gareth Edwards' After Effects tutorials at the very beginning, but at a visual effects studio, no company is using After Effects at all. They actually all use this software called Nuke. And Nuke is completely free for you to use on your own personal projects. So I'll get more into that in a little bit. I'll show you some more techniques there after we break down the stock footage thing. But if you're serious about working in Hollywood visual effects, you absolutely need to learn Nuke. And Nuke is way better when you're working on sequences instead of just working on one shot. You can definitely use After Effects on 1 or 2 shots for visual effects, but it does become a lot more difficult when you're trying to make templates across, for short films, you might have literally 100 or 200 shots. So that's when it gets really, really tricky, and that's where you want to start using Nuke. But the base concepts here still apply. So really quick here, you just right click on your camera, you export it as an FBX, that's all that's going on here. And then we're gonna render out our depth pass and our position pass. So all you gotta do is click on, you just got to render this out as an EXR sequence. So add setting, go add an EXR sequence. And then in our deferred rendering tab, we just need to enable 2 post-process materials. So the first one is good to go. The first one is our world depth. And then the second pass here is our world position pass. So this is how we're going to do some cool stuff. We're going to do some cool stuff with that in just a second. But really, all you need are these 2 passes. Everyone is asking, how do you render out AOVs out of Unreal? This is how you do it. And if you want to separate out passes, people overcomplicate that process. I'll cover it in a future video, I'm sure. But honestly, you just need these 2 passes. You do not need every single light isolated inside of Nuke. And the reason why is it's just faster to re-render your Unreal render than it is to tweak things in Nuke. Like, it sounds crazy that working in 3D is faster than working in 2D in Nuke in your compositing software, but it's so much faster. So that's why I don't even worry about rendering things separately. And if you need to, I'll cover it in a future video, don't worry. But yeah, so this is what we're gonna cover here. So this is kind of the walkthrough of, we're gonna add in sparks, we're gonna add in breath, we're gonna add in cool lens effects and anamorphic lens flares and stuff like that. So this is our image plane node inside of Nuke, and this is just from nukepedia.com. And all we're doing here is we have our Unreal camera. Literally, I just imported the Unreal camera, just create a camera node, import it, boom, it's in there. Then you plug in this camera into an image plane node. And then from here, on the very right side here, it's almost cut off, but on the very right side here, top right, we have our distance. So we can say, how far do we want this image plane to be? So this is in centimeters. This is literally 27,000 centimeters in depth in the middle of our city. We're taking this image, these spark images here, and we're gonna place it in the middle of our CG scene. And then by using that real camera, we're gonna get all the animation of, like, it's just gonna track into the exact right place. Like, it's gonna match perfectly in our scene. And by doing that, by exporting the real camera from Sequencer, it's very easy just to add that into our shot. I also need to give a shout out to Compositing Academy, Alex Hanneman over there. He's another fellow visual effects artist who's worked at a number of great studios. We've had the pleasure working together over at MPC and at ILM. And he has these spark elements over there, and they're super great. They have a lot of life, and it's like those Michael Bay spark effects where it's not really photoreal, but it's like the stuff that you notice, and that I just love the idea of telling bigger, better stories, not making everything look perfectly as it would in real life. So I really love these specific sparks. But yeah, so we can throw them in here, and then by using our depth pass, and literally we just have our depth pass, and then we add in a grade node underneath here. If you want to go back and see exactly what I'm doing, I would just go through here and pause. But literally by changing our black point and our white point, we can isolate where in depth. So I said with that image plane, we're at a distance of 27,000 units. So with this, I want to set my black point to 27,000 units. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to make sure that everything at 27,000 units, which is basically this L shape, this trapezoid building right here. This is basically where 27,000 units is. Everything in front of it is going to be black now. So now if we use this as a mask for our final image, it's literally, you can see right here, it's going to start to mask out every building in front of this asset. So we don't have to rotoscope anything. We don't have to make any mats or anything like that. We can literally apply a depth fade node inside of Nuke. That's really all that's going on here, is we're applying a depth fade inside of Nuke, but now we can use any type of footage we want. We don't have to worry about our GPU running out of memory. We can add in any stock footage, any quality of element, and add it directly into our Unreal scene. And it literally, because we're using this depth fade node, it literally starts to intersect with Godzilla around his legs. And it just adds a lot of cool depth into our shot. So very quickly, we can add that. I also went and did this with some smoke elements. So I grabbed these from actionvfx.com. I have a link down in the description there if you guys want to check that out as well. But you can see here, I took this footage and then I applied that depth remapping. So I'm just taking that black and white image and masking the smoke with that. It's a merge mask, which again, if you don't know Nuke, I'll show you how we can learn that quickly in just a little bit. But yeah, so this is how we're taking that image and we're masking it through depth. So it's literally, and this might be hard to see, but it's intersecting through Godzilla's leg and through his tail. And it really starts to feel like it has actual volume in 3D. And I did the same thing with Godzilla's breath. So I found some more stock elements here, warped them around. And by using the position pass here, we don't just have to make a mask through depth. So everything close to our camera is black and everything far away is white. We don't need to make a mask like that. With our position pass, we can basically make a 3D mask anywhere in our world. So here I'm making a 3D mask around Godzilla by using a node called the PMAT node, position mat node. So it's a world position pass. We have a position mat. I'm just making a black and white mat, a black and white alpha. Mat and alpha are the same exact thing. That word is interchangeable. And by doing that, I could add this breath, and I could literally mask out the front of Godzilla's cheek so it would look like this is spewing out of the middle of Godzilla's mouth. So it really just starts to isolate this and make it feel like, dang, that's right in the middle of Godzilla's face. And this would be something that's pretty tricky to do all inside of Unreal. But by just taking that one extra step, we can isolate that smoke, make sure it looks awesome, have a little bit coming in front of his mouth, a little bit coming behind it. And you can do a lot. And again, we're just doing 2 simple passes here. And this is like, you would be surprised. These 2 techniques, like share this with whoever you want. But right now, me and you, we have this secret. This is like 70% of comping on feature film visual effects, at least for CGI. This is like taking elements, putting them in the world, putting them at a certain depth, and then just integrating them by using these 3D mats to make them look really, really believable. So I know I just explained all of this in like 10 minutes for these 2 techniques, but I'm telling you, this is that secret sauce. Use these powers with care. With great power comes great responsibility, but now you know the actual secrets that go behind your favorite films, and now you can apply it to your Unreal scenes. So now it's super fast to render out of Unreal, but it's not so fast to work in Nuke, so we're gonna slow down in Nuke so that we can improve the quality of our shots. But then we can do some really cool tricks like this. Is that cool? All right, and then with that, it's then obviously super easy to take this home. I went further too with rain elements, and I added in rain in the foreground. And basically for the rain, I'm making an image plane at like 5,000 units, and then at 10,000, and then at 15,000 and 25,000. And we're basically making several different planes at different depth so that everything, let's do this. I love doing this experiment because it's very valuable. So if I move my hand left to right here, it's not moving very far, right? But if I do the same exact move, I'm basically moving like a foot left to right. But if I'm gonna get really close to the camera here. If I move it, this is the same amount of distance, but it's moving so much faster close to camera. That's the big difference here. So literally same exact distance, but in relation to the camera, it moves much faster closer to the camera, and it moves much slower further away. So that's why you want to create layers of depth in your foreground, midground, and background so that you get a lot of extra depth and movement and parallax in your scene. And that, again, that's that secret sauce. To take it even one step further is you want stuff in the foreground, midground, and background, and then you want to move your camera, you want to animate your camera so that you actually start to feel even more parallax and movement. So yeah, that is the Visual Effects Studio secrets. I'm seeing that JSet White. That is the secret sauce. So again, use that with care. But this was a huge epiphany that I learned on War of Being. So War of Being, if some of you might not know, if you're new to the channel, but I basically wrapped up on my on-set work over in Vancouver. And then I got a call from the folks that helped me make the Last of Us short film, and they had a music video that they wanted to make for the band Tesseract. And it was this 10-minute samurai sword fight, which was crazy. They were asking if they could do it on set for an LED stage. And then they told me their budget, and I was like, dude, no way. Like, no way. You cannot do it that way. But I thought, you know what? It actually might be just cheaper to do it as an animated film in Unreal. And through that project, that's basically how I developed all of the frameworks and techniques that I'm able to now hopefully explain pretty quickly today. But obviously it took me a super long time to learn them. And yeah, it was like literally 130 shots. We ended up cutting 30 of those shots for the final film. But that's where I learned a lot of how to be efficient inside of Unreal. And the biggest lesson and takeaway that I had from that project was with Unreal, we've been able to work so fast. But that last step of rendering and compositing, if you're not careful, it can take you 20 to 80% of the time. So this is a thing where the time adds up so quickly when you have 100 shots. When you need not just 2 or 3, you're making 100 visual effects shots, you need the entire pipeline to be as fast as possible. And if you have to like spend time compositing every single shot, it slows down an incredible amount of time. Now, if you have a team, awesome. I didn't. It was just 5 of us making that entire film. So that's where I started to realize that your workflow, it's either all real time or it's not real time. And a big mistake I see with Unreal is people are trying to use the path tracing renderer out of Unreal because they think it's going to be higher quality. And arguably it can be. But the problem is that then we're just going back to the old school way of making visual effects. And if you've made it this far, I know we're going long here. I appreciate all y'all sticking around. Hopefully I'm making it worth it so far. But this is honestly the biggest lesson I learned, is that if you path trace everything, that render time comes back and you have all the disadvantages of a traditional visual effects studio instead of this really unique skill set as an Unreal filmmaker. So path tracing is not real time. Compositing is also not real time. In fact, it actually takes longer just to play back your sequence from Unreal. Like, this is real time in Nuke. This is how long it takes to just watch your render for the first time. Like, this is insanely slow. And that was like such a huge epiphany to me, was like, whoa, it's faster to render out of Unreal than it is to render out of Nuke, which seems totally backwards, because like, how can 3D be faster to render than Nuke, which is like a 2D software? But it's absolutely true. So again, if you're not careful here, and if you're working in an inefficient way, like I was at the beginning, you're gonna waste a lot of time compositing your shots. So that's why I really started to realize this is now like just seared into my brain as a constant reminder, is your workflow is either all real time or it's not real time. And if it's not real time, you want to keep refining your workflow until it is. So that's why I wanted to come up with the absolute best way of working in Unreal, so that every part of the process, including rendering, including compositing, could be as close to real time as possible. So that's why I mentioned a lot of times on the videos and stuff. That's why I developed the one-click compositing template. And this is literally what I use on all of my visual effects shots, because it just makes this last step of compositing so much faster. It adds in that extra layer of lens effects, of diffusion, of chromatic aberration, all of the final polish pass things that I'm adding in on movies like Godzilla vs. Kong. Literally, it's the same exact fundamental techniques, and now I've obviously been able to figure out my exact personal taste and preference, and figure out my own personal secret sauce to make it as efficient as possible too. And yeah, so that was the last step on this process, and all the shots here was adding that one-click compositing template so that we could actually do this super efficiently. So is that cool? Did you learn some VFX secrets there? I hope there's something new, even for you pros out there who've been at studios. Hopefully you learned a couple things that are new there, because I was able to go through all this super quickly, but this took me a very long time to figure out how all of the pieces connect together, so we could just focus on the filmmaking and not get tied down with all of the technical aspects of Unreal. I've been talking for a long time, but yeah, so that's like the meat of the presentation. For any of you out there who want to go to that next level, and maybe you're new to Unreal and you want to just shortcut the 6 months, 12 months. It definitely took me at least 12 months to feel comfortable in Unreal. If you want to avoid going through all of the rabbit holes of reading the entire documentation, of learning everything the hard way, I have a super quick offer that I think you're gonna like if you wanna shortcut that entire process and just focus on the fun, creative filmmaking side of Unreal. Is that cool? So what I got here is basically, if you had free characters, free animations, and free environments to start making films, do you think you could actually start creating your first visual effects shot? And from there, do you think you could actually start making a sequence and make your own action film? And from there, the real superpower is you can now build your own demo reel incredibly quickly. And a demo reel is the missing link. Like, you don't need a college degree to get a job in the industry. You just need a demo reel that stands out from everyone else. It really is. And that's why I was able to subvert college and kind of go right into the visual effects studios, and ultimately land that first job. So that's the idea here, is we can just focus on the fun, creative filmmaking side of Unreal and blast through all of the technical sides of Unreal, learn all of the techniques that go into virtual production, because ultimately Unreal Engine is the system. You just need to understand how it all works together. And this is my biggest problem with learning on YouTube personally, because I definitely tried to learn as much as I could on YouTube, but you're learning game development from people who have never made games, and you're learning filmmaking from people who have never learned how to make films in Unreal. They've maybe made 1 or 2 shots, but they haven't actually gone through the entire filmmaking process to learn all of these tiny roadblocks along the way. So I definitely love YouTube as a resource, but it still has a lot of pitfalls. It's still going through this winding maze because a lot of YouTube content is figuring out how to use specific features of Unreal, but it's not teaching you the filmmaking workflow. It's not showing you how you can flow from idea into animation, into lighting, into rendering in this super simple way. It's just, hey, here's how to do this one thing with blueprints. Here's how to do this one thing with making a rig, instead of how the entire process works together. So I want to touch on quickly here why artists fail when learning Unreal and how you can avoid it. Because the big thing with Unreal and visual effects in general is like talent does not matter. Like everyone starts not knowing how to use these programs and softwares and being a beginner. Like that's not something to be ashamed of. The only thing to be ashamed of is not getting started if it's something that you really want to do. So motivation comes and goes, but if you are super passionate and it's something that you want to become a better filmmaker, you want to practice, but you don't want to, suffer through the pain of learning Unreal. The big problem with learning Unreal is this is the learning curve that you want, is where very quickly you go from, you have this desire, you know where you want to go, so you put in a little amount of time, you learn a lot, and then on the last 80%, you start learning those little techniques as you go. But the problem with Unreal is that this is how the learning curve was for me and for a lot of people out there, because and this is, where at the bottom here is basically where I gave up, at the valley of despair, because a lot of times too, you'll just hit a roadblock and you're searching through old forum posts, you're searching through old YouTube videos, and everything's outdated. It's either on like Unreal 5.1 or Unreal 4.27. There's so many versions now, and it can be really confusing when it seems like the answer should be something super simple. And this is the real reason why, is a lot of us are probably coming from a visual effects background and not a game development background. And the problem is we're trying to apply our visual effects brain to a game engine. And it's not until you learn the game engine side of Unreal that you're actually able to master all of the skills that it takes to make films efficiently. So if you want to learn Unreal the easy way, my recommendation every time is you gotta start with game dev. And it doesn't mean you have to make a complex game. You don't have to make some crazy first-person shooter or anything insane like that. You don't need to make a full-on game and release it on Steam. You just need to understand how Unreal works in the first place. Because the biggest thing with Unreal is the bottleneck is learning. It's not render times. It's just learning it in the first place. So that's the biggest bottleneck. But the advantage is, like, once you learn Unreal, you never have to learn it again. So like with the old way of doing visual effects, you have to suffer through render times every single time. You're always waiting around. You always have to, you have that process where you're waiting for those renders, whereas you never have that with Unreal. You just need to go through this first, rocky cutscene of you learning all of these skills for the first time. So this was a thing I really realized firsthand on Avatar: The Last Airbender, is I literally, to learn this the first time before I had my job on set for virtual production, is I knew the basics, but I never like being the least prepared person in any situation. If anything, that's probably like the one thing I could absolutely pinpoint, is like I always come prepared, for sure. And when I got hired to work on set for virtual production on a big show, I was not going to show up unprepared. So at that point, I literally quit my job and I took an entire month to just go all in on making practice projects 10 hours a day, every single day. I go a little nuts when I need to make things work, and when we're in a time crunch, and I got to figure this out. I got to be comfortable in Unreal. But that was at a fortunate spot where I was able to take off an entire month. I was able to dedicate all my time to it. I had the right computer to do it, all these things. But what was so funny is after 1 week of being on set around people that actually knew Unreal, I probably learned more in that first week than an entire month of me trying to learn every last thing on my own by myself. And I think I'm pretty good at self-teaching myself things. I've done all of the YouTube learning and learning it the hard way, but even just doing it with people that had used Unreal at Visual Effects Studios, it really cut all that time in half. And the big lesson I learned, and something you absolutely need to take away, is that the problem is we're using a game engine to create films. We're not using a visual effects or a render engine. It is a game engine first and foremost. And that is why most people fail. This is the exact reason, is because they're not game developers, but they're trying to use this game development tool to learn visual effects. And this is something Epic doesn't do a great job about telling people, is they kind of just show the final result, but they don't show how people got to become comfortable in Unreal. And usually it was most of those early adopters spent 12 months, 2 years, 3 years trying to figure out how to adapt Unreal into this process. And the real reason why it is so difficult is this really basic idea, what I call the skill bridge here. So the problem with Unreal is that you need to master every single skill. On one side we have game dev, on one side we have visual effects. And if you don't know how every single one of these parts work, as soon as you're trying to cross the bridge, it's going to crumble out from under you, because you need to know every single part. You need to understand blueprints, rendering, lighting, characters, compositing, all of these things if you want to make great looking films and movies. So this is the biggest problem. But if you can learn all of them and you can go from A to B, then it becomes incredibly easy. Then it is like driving a car. Like driving stick for the first time is pretty difficult. But once you know it, it becomes natural. You don't even have to think about it at a certain point. So that's why I definitely try to put an emphasis on learning game dev and visual effects together. So let me ask you a question. If all you needed was 30 minutes a day to master Unreal Engine, would you do it? Would you actually just take the 30 minutes that it takes to learn this entire process? And by the end of this, it only takes about 21 days, and you can learn all of these different skills along the way. Would you do it? And if Unreal, all it did was get rid of render times from your life forever, you no longer have to wait for renders, would that be worth it? If all you could do is eliminate camera gear and rentals and hiring crew for every time you want to practice, does that sound like it'd be worth it? And ultimately, why I'm in love with Unreal is you're able to practice for free. Like, that's what we're talking about here, is you can practice filmmaking and actually finish your own ideas in animated films completely for free. So I want to help you do that. I've been able to help about 500 people do that just like you, because I know how hard it was the first time, and I know how hard it is to build that first demo reel. But once you have that demo reel, you can send it out to any studio, you can work on any team in the world if you have a demo reel that stands out. And that's really what you need to land that dream job. And that's that same process I took to end up trying to work on all these movies, is just building the right demo reel and getting it in front of the right person so I could land any of these jobs. So that's why I've created Unreal Fundamentals, which is a 18-hour training course, but all you need is 30 to 60 minutes every single day, and I'll teach you the entire Unreal filmmaking process based off of real production case studies. Again, not just off some ideas, but what has actually worked, like in process, and we'll basically take you from a complete beginner and teach you everything you need to know. So we'll teach you how to create your own game. We'll teach you how to make a basic Pac-Man game. And from there, we'll jump into environments, and we'll jump into creating films. We'll add effects. We'll work with Niagara. We'll work with blueprints. And ultimately, we're just gonna focus on the filmmaking side of Unreal. So you can just focus on creating film sets, creating action scenes, and having fun creating the films that you've always been wanting to make inside your head. And this, like I said before, like this is not some crazy difficult process. Most people just learn it in the wrong order. So that's why I spent a lot of time before I made any videos. I spent like a month writing this thing to think of how could I make sure even a fourth grader would be able to follow through this and learn all of the skills they need. So this is Unreal Fundamentals. It is how to go from a complete beginner to Unreal, to an Unreal filmmaker in just 21 days. And we'll teach you how to make 3 different environments. Actually, this is a little old. We've been updating it since it came out. This is from 6 months ago. But yeah, we've been updating it constantly, like every month. And the thing with this is I had 2 choices with this, just to be upfront to everyone, is I think a lot of people, I would have loved to put out like a $40 master training course. But the reality is, like I'd either have to make it way shorter and not give you free characters and not give you all the great resources. Like we literally, I'll show all the stuff we put into it, but we got plane models, we got rigs, we got characters, we got everything you need to get started. And I didn't want to skimp out and not supply all that stuff, but obviously it takes resources, it takes time, it takes artists working together. So I could either go super short and super low cost, or I could just give you every single thing that you need along the way. And that's what I wanted to do. And that's why we've been able to help so many people, is because we're not solving one problem, we're solving every problem as you're trying to learn Unreal, so that you can actually make films by the end of it and not just watch some tutorials and like, hey, that was cool, that was fun. But no, you actually can build a demo reel, you can actually make your own film, and start making your own action scenes. So typically just the training course goes for $597. And don't worry, I'm gonna make a special offer for all of you today. It's not gonna cost $597 for those of you on the call right now. I want to over deliver on every aspect, and you guys stuck with this entire time. We're here late, but yeah, on top of that, I didn't just want to make some video training course. It's like, that's just the same thing as YouTube. I actually wanted to solve every problem that I experienced as I was trying to learn filmmaking in Unreal. So like I said, rendering can be the absolute bane of your existence when you're first starting out. But what's so cool is you're working in real time in Unreal. But you need to make sure you have the right render presets so that you're rendering as fast as possible. So I compiled all of the best render presets I've ever created. I did all of the math. I figured out exactly what is the fastest preset possible for every situation. I did the math, I did the calculations, I did it a whole matrix to make sure it's actually the most efficient. And these are basically the same exact presets I use every time. So to play blast my renders, where a 10-second clip takes 20 seconds to render out, that's in here. The EXR preset, that's in here. Path tracing presets, it's all in here, so you don't have to think about the settings and get tied down with all the technical parts. You can just select the one you want, and you can start rendering lightning fast, and I mean it, because you can just get these basically instant renders where what you see in your viewport is what you get to render out, so you can throw it in your editing timeline, or you can go composite it right away. So these are battle tested. There's what's actually been used on productions. I use them to this day, and every time I learn something new, I update these presets. So I literally just added one less than a month ago based on the last film I made for the Dune Masterclass. I figured out some stuff for the ornithopters and what makes those wings motion blur look so good, and then I updated the preset. So this is very much a living and breathing documentation of what I find actually works every single month. And yeah, you can get this for free when you sign up for Unreal Fundamentals. But like I said, compositing can also sneak up on you and end up taking up to 50% or 80% of the time. And again, we don't need you to learn every single part of compositing just to make your own films. I want to make it super easy so you can just get a great looking result instead of having to learn a brand new software, so that you could instantly apply this if that's what you want to do. So that's why I packaged up my one-click compositing template. These are all the presets, all the lens effects that I would use every single time on a real Hollywood visual effects production. Like straight up, it's chromatic aberration, it's lens effects, it's diffusion, it's lens flares, it's everything. And again, I update this as I learn new techniques. So this is one click, you press setup, you drag a couple sliders to fine tune your chromatic aberration, and it will look just like a real photograph. And again, I practice what I preach. This is exactly what I use on all my projects. If it wasn't good enough for me to use, I wouldn't use it. So there's no difference between the one that's in the training and the one that I use on my own machine. It's the exact same template I use, and this has honestly transformed the way I work on my own projects and my own freelance work. I use this on every single freelance project as well. It applies everything you've seen today, and all the cool techniques that I end up using on Hollywood films is included in this template. But I didn't stop there. I just want to solve every single problem you might have, because again, it took me so long because I was trying to crack the code on every single aspect of Unreal. So we have materials. You probably know something about materials if you used Blender or Maya in the past. But again, we're learning a game engine, not a visual effects engine. So everything is named in a different way. It can be very confusing. So I made a one giant master template and took 2 years of lessons of creating materials in Unreal and made a really easy to use copy and paste template, so you can use all the best nodes without any confusion, without not knowing what you don't know, I'm gonna give you all the best ones that I use. And again, this is something I copy into every project before starting, so you can just use the best in-class nodes and ways to make materials so that you know, and basically this goes along with an entire chapter that shows you how to use this. So that's solving materials. And again, we're also gonna solve blueprints for you. So I built another framework, which is Blueprints for Beginners. It's how to make artist-friendly tools in no time using blueprints. Not how to use blueprints to make games, but how to use them to make films, how to make virtual cameras, things like that, and how to create sparks and effects. And we have some nice decals on how to make cloud cards, and basically give you the exact skills to start creating your own artist blueprints to creatively problem solve on your own projects. And yeah, this is the exact cloud card thing I used on the Dune Masterclass. It's included in here along with the Blueprints for Beginners framework, so you don't have to worry about troubleshooting through all of the blueprints side of Unreal. You can just use it and learn how it should be used for films in Unreal. So that is the roadmap. That's gonna solve all of the technical skills inside of Unreal. Does that sound cool? But we also need to solve, well, I guess we'll get to filmmaking in a second, but one last thing to make sure that you don't get stuck is a lot of people hate the Unreal documentation because it's written by game developers for game developers. So I wanted to also make that as simple as possible. So I literally went by myself and rewrote the documentation to make it so anyone could understand this. So we have screenshots of every workflow. This is basically the entire workflow documented in one spot. So if there's ever a term you don't understand, there's ever a concept you're not clear on, you can either use the table of contents, jump to the definition, or just hit Control F and find any part of the workflow in just a second. Like that's how easy it should be, but we actually went ahead and built it so it can be that simple. So that's the filmmaker's glossary. And we also want to hold you accountable. So I really mean it when I say this will take just 21 days to learn Unreal filmmaking from scratch. So we'll be your accountability partner, and we'll send you cheat sheets, templates, and basically recap every lesson as we go. So even if you miss one day, you'll get the best, you'll get the top lessons from yesterday's work direct into your inbox, so you never get left behind, and you can make sure that at the end of these 3 weeks that you actually have this skill set. So we'll help hold you accountable, and we'll make sure you don't miss anything as you go. But again, we're missing this one critical skill, and that is filmmaking. We touched on it today, but we also just built 2 entire brand new chapters for Unreal Fundamentals to make sure that anyone can start making films. Ones with characters and ones with vehicles. So this is our project with characters. We'll walk you through how to add effects, how to create your own action scene with free animations, free characters, and build an environment for free, and teach you how to add all of the dynamic effects, the best workflows for animation, so you can just focus on being a filmmaker and not get tied down with actually animating your shots. Like you can create shots like this without knowing how to animate. That is the power of these filmmaking chapters, is we'll show you how to use free animations that you can find online and use them to create fight choreography in your own films. And it's not just me saying this would be all great, but I'm sure you're thinking like, okay, but does this actually work? And this is our student reel. So people have been able to learn all of these techniques and not just copy what I've made in the past, but actually use them to create their own film. So if you want to make films like this with characters, with effects, with vehicles, things that look like Blade Runner, things that have that Hollywood look, this is what we're teaching, is not just how to copy my environment and copy my tutorial, but actually teach you how to make a film. And we've had, like I said, 500 other students go through this and have been able to figure out the entire process to tell their own story, not just copy something else that's out there. And honestly, this is definitely the coolest part to me, is seeing that, yes, it did work. It's not just me giving ideas. People have been able to adapt them to tell their own stories. So that's everything inside of Unreal Fundamentals as it is. So that's the video course, that's the render presets, that's the one-click compositing template, the material cheat sheet, blueprints for beginners, it's our lesson recaps, and then we also have the Unreal glossary. And I even didn't mention, but we also have the beginner's hotkey framework, so you can work even faster. My personal hotkeys that I use everywhere in Sequencer to make films even faster. Now, all of this together on its own Like the time it took for me to learn this was literally, this is a year and a half of experimenting, of using this on personal projects, of working on set, trying to figure out how everything works. I could have easily tried to bundle all of this up for $19.97. I'm not gonna do that, but this is all of the bonuses on top of the video training, just so that you can cut right to that final result. And again, we're not paying that much, like no way. I wanna make sure this is affordable. Myself, as someone who left college because it wasn't a good value for what I was given, I want to make sure that this actually delivers. So for those of you on this call right now, that would be awesome if we just got Unreal Fundamentals. But there's also some other stuff that I want to throw in for free if you want to sign up today. So the next thing is Chapter 12 in Unreal Fundamentals. So this just came out 3 weeks ago. This is a fully rigged plane and we teach you how to use it to create your own animated dogfight. So how to make your own plane battle. So this plane you're seeing right here, it's fully rigged, it's ready to go, it's inside your Unreal project files so that you can start making your own plane battles. So this is the project that we create together. I show you my entire filmmaking workflow, how to add camera shake, how to animate cameras, how to animate the planes, how to add effects, every single part of the process. So you don't just have to make films with characters, you can also make films with planes. And you can use this to build your own demo reel. And the dashboard is completely rigged. Every part of this plane is completely rigged. I want to make sure this was the absolute best thing and that it gives you something that you could actually build a demo reel around. Obviously, you can get more assets outside of this, but yeah, we invested a lot to make sure that this was awesome and gives you everything you need. And then we built an entire chapter around it to show you how to use it, how to build your own demo reel. So that is our British Bulldog plane, which just comes included now. Nothing extra, but obviously we had to pay to make sure that this works and it looks awesome and that we can rig it and make this optimized. But again, I'm not stopping there. We're gonna throw in a lot of extra bonuses in here. We also have the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass. So like I said, you might know After Effects, maybe you don't, but Nuke is this super powerful software you have to know if you want to work at a visual effects studio. So I took a poll of 600 artists and 90% of them said they didn't know how to use Nuke for their own visual effects. So like I said, Nuke is completely free for you to use on personal projects, but it's what big studios use when they're making films. So Avengers, Godzilla vs. Kong, all these big movies, we're using Nuke. We're not using After Effects. So I wanted to make some training that could make this process super easy and fast. So we're gonna teach you everything you need to know as a complete beginner in Nuke to get you up to speed so you know how to use Nuke and then how to use it with Unreal to take your renders to the next level. So that's what we're doing here. This is exactly what I like, all the techniques and how to use the one-click compositing template, why it works the way it does. But specifically, we touch on green screen compositing. So we'll show you how to take live action footage. We'll show you how to track the camera so you can recreate that camera move and then create backgrounds inside of Unreal. So if you ever want to do freelance work, you ever wanted to make your own films, I see just lots of bands wanting to do this because a lot of people, funny enough, are like music producers who want to just make their own music videos, which is super cool. So a lot of people are using this for that exact reason, kind of like what we did with Tesseract. But this is the workflow. This is the exact way to do that, to take live action footage. And this is the fastest workflow that I've ever found for working fast in Unreal. So using that footage, bringing it into Unreal, but then finishing that composite in Nuke so that we're working in real time as long as possible. We're not spending too much time in Nuke. We're only using Nuke for what it's great at. And then we're able to take those green screen renders and put them into Nuke. And it was actually really cool. I got some really great feedback from Howard Gersh, who's an ex-ILM TD. And yeah, he said he used Nuke in production, but his shots would have truly benefited from all the cool nuggets he learned in that Unreal to Nuke Masterclass. So I mean it when I say it. All the stuff I make, I'm trying to pour as much as I can into this. I'm leaving nothing behind. These are all my best secrets. Even more ways to use the position pass and depth pass that I showed you earlier. All those visual effects secrets that took me so long to learn, you can learn all of that in just a single day. It'll just take 6 hours, and not because like I wanted to make sure it's as efficient as possible. It doesn't need to be 12 hours. You can learn everything you need to know in just 6 hours. We also had Jean-Denis say that he came in knowing nothing about compositing. So those of you that are complete beginners, he knew nothing about compositing and nothing about Nuke, and he was able to start using it for his own Unreal renders. So like I said, trying to pack in everything that I've learned so that you can create cinematic renders every single time. So that's the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass. Usually this is a complete separate paid course. We have project files in there. There's 3 different shots with full multipass EXRs. We had to create the assets. We had to create the renders. I had to figure out all the techniques. But for that, you don't need to worry about any of that. We're going to include it for free if you sign up to Unreal Fundamentals today. We also have a private Discord group. So I don't have a public Discord group. It's only for those of you and those filmmakers in the past who are really serious about this, who want to take their skills to the next level and want weekly feedback on their own work. So the Discord is a place for you to get feedback and get help troubleshooting or creative feedback. So I try to pop in there at least once a week to give creative feedback. We try to do work in progress Wednesdays so that we all share our work in progress. I've been sharing some Godzilla renders over there in the Discord. And yeah, just trying to make sure that everyone gets some feedback on what they're doing. If they have problems, that we can help get rid of any roadblocks in their way. And also, it's a great way to crew up with like-minded visual effects artists just like you to start creating your own films. This is such an overlooked part of the filmmaking process, is collaborating with other artists. So this is our way to make sure that it's not public. We just want to make sure that people who are super into this actually have a place to go to have their questions answered and get feedback on their work. So again, could easily charge $49. I'm in there giving feedback every work. So if you want feedback on your work, not everyone takes advantage of this, but like if you're serious about getting feedback on your work, I would absolutely go in there and start posting and contribute to Work in Progress Wednesdays, because that's where I'm gonna spend the most time. But this is a great way to get feedback on your work. You'll get 1-year access to that Discord if you sign up today. But do not worry. Like I said, this is not going to cost you $4,000. Not going to cost college prices. Like that would totally go against everything that I've been trying to do. It's not going to cost you $19.97. Like the Unreal Fundamentals is easily worth. It's not even going to cost you $9.97. You can get everything here. Unreal Fundamentals, the bonus chapter, the free plane asset, the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass, and get personal feedback, creative feedback, and technical feedback on your work for just $497. So if you go to unrealforvfx.com/go, that's going to be the link to get this special offer, and it's just for those of you on this call right now. So we're only going to have 50 seats. This will go down Sunday night. So it's just those for those of you who are looking to go to that next level, who want that shortcut and want to just learn all of this stuff in no time and just get started and work on the fun parts of Unreal. So yeah, we'll jump into some questions and answers here, but I'm going to make sure that this is pinned at the top of the chat here, because I just want to make sure that everyone has access to that. And again, this will be taken down on Sunday night, or it will also, I'm only going to leave 50 seats up. So we'll close that as soon as we hit 50 seats. The live stream will be public until we do it, but here we go. This is the link for those of you that are interested. And yeah, this is because, again, it just took me so much time to learn all of this myself. I wanted to put all of these lessons in one place so I could go back and update it and teach you every single insight I'm learning as I learn it. So it's lifetime access, even if you get the payment plan. So I didn't even mention that. So there's also a payment plan. So for those of you, I know $497 can be a lot if it's, suddenly, we're trying to do this really quickly. So not everyone just has that at the ready. And I totally understand that, especially those students out there, or those of you who, I started trying to learn this stuff when I was 15 or 16. So I had to always go back to like my parents and try to convince them. So anyway, all that aside, we also have a payment plan. So you can get started and get the same thing for just $99 per month. It'll cost $100. It's just one extra payment. So instead of $497, it's $597 with the payment plan. But again, you get started for $99. You'll get access to everything. You'll get the templates. You'll get the cheat sheets. You'll get everything we talked about so far. And yeah, that's going to be the best spot to go for that. So I'm just going to make sure that link works. Cool. And yeah, would love to answer any questions for those of you that are still here. And yeah, we also, let's also just share this super quick. But yeah, if you have any questions, definitely let me know. Super happy to answer them. And for those of you who, like, I totally get it. The question always asks, like, it's cool, but will it work for me? And I used to be hopeful, but after seeing all the student feedback and seeing people that are not just copying the work, like most people, when they finish this course, they have a separate project that they finished along with it. They're able to follow the tutorials. It is step-by-step environment tutorials and things like that. But people have had the best success rate by actually creating their own projects and applying all these techniques into their own films right away. So Louis Cha is someone who joined 2 months ago. He was a complete beginner, and he said he could get up and running in just 3 weeks. So that 21 days, we really mean it. I try to work backwards to say, I don't want you guys to spend, 8 weeks trying to learn this. I want you to get the result you're looking for in just 21 days. And hopefully, now that we've seen people go through it and be successful with it, thankfully, we know that this kind of works. We also had Jonas Singh, who actually is Zalushi on YouTube. He has like 500K subscribers now, I think. But yeah, he's a VR YouTuber, and he actually started making his own cutscenes, like his own skits in these video games. And he said he knew next to nothing about Unreal Engine. He was just a gamer when he first started, but he loved movies, and he gained the skills to build scenes and render cinematics from scratch. So this is actually work from Zalushi, and you could go to his channel and check this out on one of his latest videos. So he was able to make a really cool Star Wars short film in the middle of his YouTube video. And yeah, telling big stories with these big camera movements, adding animation. He did something really cool too, which I totally recommend, is when you're making your first film, you want to make sure that that you can actually finish that first film. So a lot of people, they fall for this trap of trying to do metahumans in their first film, which can be really, really tricky, because it's basically like you're going on expert mode when you've never made your first film. So you want to give yourself the easiest and most successful roadmap possible. So what I always recommend is trying to do a short film with people with helmets first. You'll see, again, I practice what I preach, that War of Being short film. That was the first time of doing like a long short film with action scenes and continuity and characters and telling a story. So we made it slightly easier on ourselves, and we made it with helmets first. Zalushi did the same thing. And then after that, once he got comfortable, he started to make himself as his own metahuman. So he's working on this Star Wars project now. Super excited to see where it goes. But that's what we're talking about, is making one project at a time, learning Unreal in the right way, in the right order, not doing too much too quick and then getting stuck and not actually getting that result, but doing it in the right way, step by step by step, in a way that I think anyone can learn this. You don't need to be someone who works in visual effects. You don't need to be someone who knows how to animate or who has even made films, to be quite honest. As long as you're passionate about films and you want to make this, it's really designed for anyone in mind. And also, the tactics are there for those of you that work at a visual effects studio and you want to go and learn how I'm using, like, these are also the techniques that I use when I'm using Unreal at a visual effects studio. So maybe you work at another studio, you might be using Maya or Houdini or a different software package, but you want to learn Unreal for filmmaking, for previs, so you can work in cinematics, or maybe start working in the games industry on their cinematics instead of at a visual effects studio. Totally works for you. We've had lots of people go through that and are able to build demo reels. Also, Felipe Fenner, he is a director and visual effects artist. And he said now he can work faster and be focused as a director and 3D artist. We also had Jay Lee from Vancouver, who said it's easily the best Unreal 5 course out there, and he'd recommend it in a heartbeat. And I'm just sharing these because I get it. I understand that I'm just a dude on the internet. Like, who knows if this works? But I wouldn't be so passionate about this. I love Unreal. I love filmmaking. And honestly, the reason why I'm doing this is because I actually genuinely believe that the next generation of filmmakers is coming from YouTube. Like, that's what my game plan is not to go sell out to a studio. It's actually using Unreal fundamentals to, instead of raising money and doing a Kickstarter that way, I want to actually give you guys something, teach you the skill of filmmaking and everything that I have to offer, instead of just like selling t-shirts to fund a film. That's fine too, like no shade against that, but I felt like I actually want to give something of value, and then all of this is just going to pour back into future films, hiring artists to make bigger and better films, and then release all of that behind the scenes on the YouTube channel. Like that's the master plan all laid out right there. It's just to kind of pour back in and have a way to make bigger and better films and work with artists. So that's, like I said, I try to work with different artists and new artists every single month because the community is so big. There's so many talented people out there, and yeah, definitely want us all to be a part of it. So yeah, Jay Lee made these Blade Runner shots, which are really cool. This was his first work after finishing Unreal Fundamentals. So he finished Chapter 10, Chapter 11 and Chapter 12 weren't out yet, and he was able to make this right after finishing Unreal Fundamentals. He made these 2 shots from Blade Runner to apply these techniques. And then we also had Tom Davis, who's a character artist at Sony ImageWorks. So folks that are actually from the industry. I was over at Sony ImageWorks as well for Across the Spider-Verse. Did not know Tom at the time, but yeah, he said it was easy to understand and comprehend compared to other courses. And I think it's because it's visual effects and filmmaking focused. So yeah, we've worked with lots of people, over 500 happy students so far. And yeah, it's hilarious. Maybe I shouldn't share this, but literally, I was just checking to see what to compare like our training versus other like online courses and other training out there. And like we have less than a 2% refund rate because people actually use this and they want to continue using it. It's not just to learn it once. We designed all of the templates and all of the resources so that we can be there with you as you learn Unreal, and that every insight I get, that you also get that with us too. So I'm seeing Kyle, you signed up. That's awesome. Ian, sweet. And by the way, yeah, if you have any issues at all, just email me at learn@unrealforvfx.com. We'll get back to you. You should see the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass appear in like about 5 to 10 minutes. It will take a little bit of time. We have an automation going on in the background there. But I would love to answer some questions for you. But again, just go to unrealforvfx.com/go or click the link in the chat if you want to get started. This will be open until Sunday night or until we reach 50 signups. So whichever comes first. And yeah, it's going to be open for anyone. And I'm even going to show, let me just show you what it looks like behind the scenes here, and then we'll answer some questions. So put your questions in the chat and then we'll answer everyone there. But yeah, so let's actually love to just show you what's going on and what the platform looks like. So if I just share my screen here super quick, we're looking at unrealforvfx.com. So it's learn.unrealforvfx.com, or email us at learn@unrealforvfx.com. But yeah, you'll get the Unreal Fundamentals, you'll get the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass, and then we're running some mentorship sessions now. So you guys won't see that, but that's on the side there. And then this is Unreal Fundamentals. So you'll see it's literally 96 different videos. Some are short, some are long. Also I'm seeing Mando, who's that just signed up? That's super cool. Emmanuel, thanks for joining, man. Yeah, we got everything. We teach everything in the right order so we can go from characters to materials to lighting to Niagara. And I honestly believe this is the best Niagara training out there. It's so confusing, and Niagara is another tool that is definitely by game designers for game designers, but we simplified all of that. I took a lot of time to make sure that this was written in the right way before we recorded anything to make sure I could simplify all these processes. So anyway, and then we build 3 different environments. So we build this shrine from Raya and the Last Dragon, go through the entire process. So this one chapter is 2 hours long, just to show you every single part. And then we even get into rendering and compositing. And then our new 2 chapters is filmmaking with characters, how to make your own action scenes, how to build those with characters.
Welcome
we
to
got a free
chapter
project
11.
file for
now
that.
that we understand
so
all of the materials
here,
and notice,
and then you can jump right into the fun filmmaking part of Unreal. And then we also have chapter 12, which is where you can create your own
together
plane
we're
battle.
going to take our own
So we go through the entire film school process, and again, making a film step by step to drag you through every step so you don't get left behind. We show you how to make those artist-friendly blueprints, how to create cloud cards.
So we have
in a
our
super
plane.
Fun way.
Let's
I'm
start
also
off
seeing
with
Leonardo.
something
Thanks for
really
joining, man.
close already.
And
so there
yeah,
we go.
So
we already have
teach
version
everything
1
that
of
you
our
need to
cloud
learn
card, but
to
let's
not
add a
just
couple
be
more controls of
technical
this to make
Unreal
things
artists.
easier.
You will learn the
So there's 2
technical side.
things here that I
This is
want
the
to add.
exact
The
teaching
first
I would have
is
wanted
this
before working
gradient
on
mask
set and
that I've
virtual
included.
production,
So I'm just
down
going
to
to drag
the
this
T,
in the
down to
scene.
all of the tactics
And
and
all that
insights,
this is
but
used
we
for,
also
if I
put an
preview
extreme
this,
emphasis
is
on
to take any
filmmaking
input
and making
texture
sure
like
that
this
we're
cloud
putting that
or
at
these
the forefront,
smoke
'cause I think that's what
textures.
we're all
And
trying
by
to do,
using this as a
at
black
the
and white
beginning.
mask,
So-
we can make sure
whoops, I'm
that
seeing my
what's in
audio
the
is
center of
doubling
our
up.
frame is white
and then we can fade off our edges to black, especially in our opacity mask. And this way, we'll never get a hard edge on the side of our plane. So all I'm going to do here is multiply the two of these together and plug that into the opacity.
Thanks for joining. That's awesome.
Now, this isn't a problem for this texture, but we might want to swap out.
We have the one-click compositing template. It's for After Effects and for Nuke. So if you already know After Effects, you just want to get that final result, but you can just use the template. That's awesome. And then we also have our lightning fast render presets. So you can download these, and you can see obviously it was just updated to use production quality motion blur. And then we have our glossary. Oh, whoops. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, and then we have the glossary. So yeah, here we have everything just laid out, so it's super, super simple to see. We also have our beginner's hotkeys. This is a really fun thing for Niagara. We have access to the Discord. And a really cool feature I didn't even mention yet. Again, this is basically my dream project to put every resource I ever wanted in one place. I swear some of these features are just for me because it's something I would have really loved. And one of those features is the Unreal search engine. So I literally went out and I hired the best developer that I could find, and we actually built a search engine. So I could search something like volumetric fog. Instead of digging through the entire video library, I can just go through and find where I've talked about volumetric fog in the previous lesson. So here's the previous lessons. Here's the time codes. I can find, oh yeah, in the console variables lesson, I talk about volumetric fog there. So I could optimize it. Otherwise, I could go here and say, okay, yeah, let's just go to the first time I mention it. It'll
worth noting
lesson,
our exponential.
And it'll literally jump to the exact time code I was looking for. So again, maybe you're trying to look at path tracing and like, okay, yeah, how do I enable path tracing? Yeah, let's actually say enable path tracing. Yeah, and then again, you just got to read through the captions themselves to make sure it's at the right time code. And it says, yeah, but to enable path tracing in your project settings, it looks like I can just click on this. And then
to enable,
boom, like right away, I get the result. I can literally see right here on the page that I can enable path tracing in my project settings. I know exactly what to click on. And again, like normally this would take a long time to find, but we just wanted to make this as easy as possible to use. And then we've actually just updated this. I haven't even officially announced this to the folks already in the program, but yeah, if you type in any of these search options, looks like we might have some extra traffic here. Let's go back.
All right, so next up, let's talk about path tracing and using the path trace renderer.
Yeah, so it's trying to retrieve the relevant documentation. So we can see here for the volumetric fog, I just typed in volumetric fog, and at the top here, we have the two resources for volumetric fog in Unreal. So literally, I have the documentation of Unreal right here inside Unreal Fundamentals. So I can see exactly what Unreal and Epic Games says about volumetric fog.
So I'm using this pool table as an example.
So yeah, you can get all of
this
that,
method is faster than path tracing because we're shooting out
there we go. Sorry, yeah, that was the issue. We got doubled up audio. So yeah, we got the ability to look at the actual search results from Unreal without leaving here. We're basically doing some fun AI magic to make sure we're pulling up the most relevant articles. And you can see here, we also have this is filmmaking focused, so we also pull in any best practices about filmmaking or in-camera visual effects, otherwise known as like the LED volume and like the Mandalorian virtual production stages. So we get all of that right here in one spot, and we just want to make it as easy as possible to learn Unreal. So we'll answer some questions here. I'll jump back into the topic here, but I'm seeing Ian, that's awesome, and Ken Long. Yeah, got our PC audio muted. So if you have any questions, let me know. Also, Dominique, if you're around, if you just want to send that over, let me know. But AE is like using a spoon when you need a giant machine. That is hilarious. But yeah, that's cool to see. Cinevision post effects. Yeah, you've been in there, which is super cool. How did you prevent the directional light in the Godzilla scene affect the additional 2D image planes, skyscrapers? What was the lighting setup? So if you use translucent materials, it's just when you make a material, you change your shading method to translucent. It makes it so it doesn't accept any lighting. You might need to make it unlit. So I think by default it's set to lit mode. You just change it to unlit mode, and then that's how you use DMP. Super, super simple. Cool. We also got super excited for the new Unreal Masterclass. Sweet. Yeah, and we'll show you how to put both of them together. So I'm seeing Compton Bell, you just joined, which is super awesome. Thanks for joining. That's super cool. Also, Chris Hung. Chris Hung is we got to tag team a bunch of shots in Across the Spider-Verse. So, dude, super cool to see you here, and super excited. Also, I guess so. Chris. Tom used the education budget thing, and it totally worked out cool. We got just seeing if there's any last questions here. Otherwise, I've been talking for like 3 hours. We all probably need to go to bed very, very soon. So if you got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, this is going to be up until Sunday night. The live stream is going to go down. The offer is going to be pulled down, so you won't be able to get the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass as that free bonus at all. So it is a separate course most of the time, that'll be separate in the future, so you have to pay full price for that, and then you'll obviously get all the cool bonus materials if you sign up, and you'll get that Discord access as well. So would love to see you in there and welcome all of you inside of the Discord. Gonna be super fun, and then you can get access and just get started right away, so that 3 weeks from now, it's like we've been talking about making films, and the worst thing that can happen is that 3 weeks have gone by and you haven't made any improvements learning Unreal. So regardless of the method, I just want to be there to help support you every step of the way. I love filmmaking. I love Unreal. This is what I do. No matter what, is making films at home and trying to share the best practices along the way. So we'll continue to do that over on the YouTube channel as well. But this is the best way to go from a complete beginner in Unreal and learn all of the steps, all those roadblocks along the way, and just get all the answers all in one place. If we got any last questions, let me know. I would love to see your idea conceptualization for world building. Do you have a resource going over this? We will have some resources on this. We're gonna make some additional training, which is gonna tie up some of the Dune Masterclass ideas and go in depth into the actual tactics and techniques behind all of that. So that'll be in the future later on. Don't have any sort of deadline on that, so don't hold me to anything, but we will. That'll be the spot where we really go into world building and being more conceptual. Otherwise, that's kind of what our mentorship program is for. So if any of you are interested, we do have a private mentorship program running right now. We have 16 students, and the whole idea is to build a demo reel. So just email us, just like literally put mentorship in the subject and send an email to learn@unrealforvfx.com, or reach back out to you about that. But that's totally as a bonus thing. But the idea there is to help you, give you that weekly feedback every single week and help you build a demo reel in just 8 weeks. So that's a separate thing we just started doing, which has been really cool. That's honestly, again, super fun experiment to just see how far we can help push people's work so that first project they make is good enough to actually get them hired. That's really my goal there, especially with everything being competitive in the future here. So Leo, super excited to see you in there. Chad Fox, dude, super cool to see Chad. Chad is in the mentorship, so that's really cool. And is this course for complete beginners, 1+6T? Yes, this course is designed for people that are brand new to Unreal. You can be brand new to Unreal and 3D as well. We go through the basics quickly, but we do go through everything. So one thing as well, if you are a complete beginner, the videos are designed to be fast so that you can rewatch them if you miss anything. If you haven't noticed today, I like to kind of blast through things, but the idea is it's designed as a resource, so the expectation is that you don't understand absolutely everything the first time, but we have the whole library there so that once you'll do this, you'll go through it, you'll follow along step by step to create the environments that we make, and then when you go to that next project, you'll go back through the course and say, okay, I need to learn lighting, I need to learn how would I apply Niagara effects to my project, how would I apply volumetric fog, all these things, characters, animation, motion capture, all the things that we cover inside the training, and we'll make it super simple and easy to use. So that's what I mean when I say it's designed as a resource. Is it's great to go through once, but I think the real power there is that it's really just the entire workflow put out in one place. And honestly, now the way that if I ever have to remember anything, I literally go back and use the search engine. So that's what I mean where it's kind of for me, but yeah, it's built there. And yeah, Leo, just email us about the mentorship there, and then we'll definitely let you know. Also seeing Ken Arts, thanks for joining. That's awesome. We'll answer that question too. Ken, do you envision AI being used in this process somehow in the future? To me, I personally see AI as a tool, and it literally makes me want to throw up in my mouth thinking of like typing in something and getting my film made for me. Like, I like filmmaking because I like making films. I like working with actors. I like holding the camera. I like thinking, what is the best composition? I don't want anyone to make my entire image for me. So I like it as a tool. I like it as a concept tool. I like it to speed up processes of 3D. But personally, for me, when people say Sora's going to take my job, I do not care that you think that, because A, I don't really think it's going to work that way. I don't think it's that simple. And B, it's not going to stop me from making films. And great films are not going to go out of style. Across the Spider-Verse would not be made with Sora. You need artists who have ideas, who have points of view, who want to inject that passion into the screen. And yeah, I don't think just because AI can generate a film, I think it's going to make handmade films a bit more special. I think it's going to mean that we need to tell better stories. I think it means that we're going to have to share our behind the scenes process, all of us, as we're making films, to kind of show like, yo, this is fun. Like, look at the process. Here's how we did it. Those Lord of the Rings documentaries are something I still go back to probably every month, or at minimum every other month, because I just love the process. I love being in the middle of it. I love collaborating with people. And to me, like, you're not collaborating with AI. You collaborate with other artists, with other filmmakers. And to me, that's what I want to do. I want to work with artists. I want to work with actors. And I think performance is something that, you know, comes from real people. And yeah, those are the movies I want to watch. So people might have other opinions, but that's my point of view. So yeah, well, cool. Thank you, everyone. If you haven't already, unrealforvfx.com. You can get started for just $99 and literally have access to everything you're seeing tonight, and then have it ready so you can get started literally now if you want to, depending on your time zone, or you can get started tomorrow morning. But yeah, otherwise you'll have until Sunday night. That's when this officially closes. When yeah, we'll get rid of the offer. We're gonna tear down the live stream. We're gonna tear down the offer and everything like that. So yeah, super grateful for every one of you for spending your evenings with me. I hope you learned something new. I hope that yeah, we'll also be able to share some films that we both made in the future. And yeah, we'll also show you that finished product. I'm in the middle of finishing the Godzilla film, so that will be wrapping up this week. That's what I'm going to be doing over the weekend, and we'll share those final results with you next week. So super excited to share the rest and see what you guys make inside of Unreal Fundamentals. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. And yeah, just click that link in the description if you want to join this weekend. But yeah, take it easy. Have a great night, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.